Your guide to the truth. TheNewAmericanMedia.com.
Broadcasting to you live from the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, North America, the United States of America, California, Los Angeles to be specific. Hello everybody, my name is Brian Engelman and you are listening to another episode of Agree to Disagree here on the TNAM Radio Network. Here on the TNAM Radio Network. Yes, TNAM Radio Network. Good times. Lots more shows coming this way. Things are about to get very interesting, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in our 6-year beta test here at the New American Media. Check us out at thenewamericanmedia.com. On the right-hand side of the page, you got 3 things. One is TNAM Radio. That's where you click play to listen to this show live. We will broadcast and we will tell you on Twitter and Facebook. Those are also on the right-hand side of our homepage. On Twitter, we're at American_Media_. On Facebook, you can do a search for The New American Media. You can also search for Agree to Disagree. It's our secret Facebook group. Yeah, it's been a tough week for Facebook. That whole Easter situation. Guy kills a guy on Easter. Live on Facebook. And now, since it's taken so long to catch him, you got conspiracy theorists saying, oh, it was staged, it was fake. Alright, well, what was it? I don't know. It's a bad story that came out on Easter. How about that? Let's just focus on that for just a second. So, who we're going to bring in today, this is a regular guest on our program. This is Pastor Bruce Engelman, yes? This is my uncle. We talk about spirituality, we talk about politics, and guess what? We talk about sports, too. Okay, real quick, you need to follow us on Instagram, instagram.com/thenewamericanmedia. We do funny stuff, we do great, wild art, and we can take good pictures, funny things, thought-provoking things, memes that kind of sum up what a story's really about. That's what I love about memes. This is such a great generation. You can get trapped into this thing where you just say millennials are garbage, bunch of snowflakes. So, yes, to some degree that is accurate. And you can be very jaded if you are a millennial coming up and you see these situations going on planet Earth and you just think, oh, well, everybody that's not in our generation, they're the ones that screwed it up. Well, there have been a lot of us who have been causing a lot of concern, ringing a lot of bells, calling a lot of BS on the official narratives, the stories that are only now becoming to be known as what we call fake news. So, listen, millennials, you got friends in us. We might not be 17 right now, but we've been calling BS on a lot of the same things that you have for a long time. So, team up with the smart ones among us, and let's link together and let's do this, because there's a lot of good people from my uncle's generation who lived through a lot of things. Like JFK, I mean, imagine watching that happen to your president, whether you like him or don't like him. Imagine watching that. JFK get assassinated. So, we've had him on the program before. We're going to bring him back in now. We're going to talk about a few different topics. We're going to kind of discuss Easter in general because, that will always be on a different date based on celestial occurrences with equinoxes and such. But we're going to talk about that because he is a pastor. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about that Facebook killer, that Cleveland killer guy, the Easter killer, that whole situation. We're going to talk about Trump foreign policy. What does this mean? Kim Jong, whoever Kim Jong is now, is he Is he ill? Is he going to be a goner real soon? Because I think the world is really sick of putting up with their crap. You can only put up with these threats for so long, but it's interesting because Trump has really portrayed himself as an outsider, as a social libertarian, as somebody who will be agnostic when it comes to world events, more the Ron Paul Republican. You don't really want to, be invading every country and all these stupid wars. Well, he's bombing in Syria, he's bombing in Afghanistan, and he's looking at North Korea right now going, listen, pal, you're next. I am sick of your crap. It's interesting. This is certainly not how he ran his campaign, so we're going to talk to him about that. And if we have some time, maybe we'll talk some Indians, Cavs, Browns, or Buckeyes, because Bruce is a avid sports fan, much like myself. But without further ado, we'll get him into the program now, and we'll get the ball rolling, if you will. I know Bruce was recently a guest on. Oh, geez, now I forget. Was it Caravan to Midnight or Arc Midnight? With John B. Wells. I forget which one he ended up.
Hello.
Hello, Bruce. It's Brian. Welcome to Agreed to Disagree. You are live on the air. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, Brian. Thank you very much for asking.
Are you on speaker or are you on your cell phone? Where are we at? I got a little bit of an
I'm on
echo.
speaker, but I can change that.
Yes, I got a little bit of an echo, and I know from my last interview with Laura Eisenhower, it was a little difficult for people to pick up on. Even though I could mostly make out what was going on, I think it didn't translate as well. But Bruce, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much. I was trying to introduce you, definitely explaining some of the topics we're going to get into today, but I said you were recently a guest with John B. Wells on, and I didn't know if it was Caravan to Midnight or Arc Midnight. So maybe you could reset us from that point. Tell us about the show you did with John B. Wells.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for your input and recommendation. And I must say that anybody who has listened to the show, or they can go back and archive it and still listen to it. It was November of last year. I can't remember the exact episode number, but Mr. Wells spoke very highly of you and your show. And we basically spoke for an hour and a half, no interruptions, no commercials, no PSAs, no promos, no other interviews, no breaks, for an hour and a half, virtually for an hour and a half, on the assassination of our 35th president, John F. Kennedy. And I was very impressed by the knowledge that Mr. Wells has of the assassination and its background, because most interviewers that I've done over the last 30 plus years, Brian, have very little knowledge, or they have bought the government line that Oswald did it and so forth. But I could tell Mr. Wells was not only an expert on many, many other issues of the day, but also a very, very learned man and knowledgeable man about the assassination and many of the details and the truth of what happened. So it was a tremendous honor to be on his show. He has hundreds of millions of listeners, and I sense that your show is going to follow in this same direction.
Well, I've tried to explain this, Bruce, to a few people along the way, and I said that we're just lovers of liberty, we're lovers of freedom, but in another way, because we do a lot of things. So one of our taglines here at the New American Media is seeking truth, challenging dogma, and having fun. We ask you to join the mostly civil conversation. So we kind of do a lot of things here, but in one way we're seeking truth and we're pushing for liberty, maximum freedom. But on the other hand, we're hunting monsters. I think that's one of the key things I've identified over the past few months, Bruce. One of the main reasons why I do this program, I like to have fun and talk sports on the Unhappy Hour about the Cavaliers and the Cleveland Indians and what have you, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Sure.
But those aren't very important when you break it down to brass tacks. It's not the most important stuff going on. And I just kind of said to somebody, kind of half joking, we're hunting monsters here. That's literally what we're doing. And when you're talking about Lee Harvey Oswald, you're talking about the CIA. I had John McAfee from the McAfee Antivirus, and he's starting McAfee TV and a whole bunch of different stuff. John McAfee was on talking about Vault 7 with the WikiLeaks data dump. And we're kind of thinking now, JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald, CIA, how deep did this go? Who was responsible for the Kennedy killing? And look, if I can just get your 60-second elevator pitch answer to the people that might want to check out a previous program with you and John B. Wells, or maybe you and I over the past 6 years, tell us what happened with Kennedy, because we've seen it with Trump. We've seen the CIA, the deep state. There's a lot of mistrust going on in the government, but this has been going on for 50 years. So give us the Cliff Notes if you'd be so kind.
Yes, I would be glad to, Brian. Well, there's so much I could say, but let's take off from your point of the deep state, or what I call the shadow government. President Woodrow Wilson, who the only earned PhD we've ever had as president, and that may have been why he wasn't such a great president. I used to think Wilson was one of the best, but Glenn Beck calls him the father of modern progressivism. I actually call Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt, ironically both Republicans, But Wilson said that he felt like there was always somebody lurking over his shoulder from the shadows that was questioning what he was doing and controlling him in an indirect form. He said, I could never identify it. I can't put my finger on it. But he says there's this shadow lurking in the White House. Nixon talked about the same thing, that there are people that pull strings. And John B. Wells asked me, do you think to be assassinated? And I said, they are already trying. I believe there is a mechanism already on the drawing board that the far left, the I don't know if it's the American Communist Party or the Socialists, or just the shadow government, which is, by the way, controlling both parties. I am so much more angry at the Republicans than I am the Democrats. But yes, I told John B. Wells, Brian, that there is going to be an attempt on the president's life. And I said, John, have you ever noticed that they only shoot at the good presidents? Truman, they tried to kill him in the Blair House, came very close. He was ducking and dodging bullets, and they killed Mr. Kofeld, a White House police guard, and a Secret Service agent. Of course, they did kill Kennedy, who refused to play their game and put his salary back in. Only two presidents have ever given their salary back, President John F. Kennedy and Donald Trump. And both of them were rich, so they couldn't be controlled. And, I think Trump is basically an honest man. But Kennedy comes to Dallas. Here's the thing in 30 seconds. He comes to Dallas because he wants to win the presidency. He needs Texas. He has Lyndon Johnson with him. His wife is with him for the first time in many trips. She's just lost her baby, Patrick, to death shortly after he was born. And she just gets back from Paris. She's weak. She's weakened from the loss of the baby and the pregnancy and all that, and the traveling back from meeting with de Gaulle. And he brings her to Dallas, and she's a big hit. And the last speech, I've actually stayed in the suite. A friend of mine owns an oil company, and I actually stayed in the suite that Jackie and Jacqueline spent their last night, as well as about 5 other presidents, and which is now the Hilton downtown. We have a new memorial in Fort Worth to honor his last speech ever given. But he's in Dallas to do two things. He's trying to mend the fence of the liberal faction with the conservative faction at that time of his own Democratic Party, number one, in the state of Texas. And number two, he's basically running for re-election. And Texas was thought to be a toss-up, but because he was Catholic and viewed as a liberal, even though he was an ultra-conservative in reality by today's standards. So he comes to Dallas. He's warned by 50 people not to come to Dallas. His secretary, whom I've had the opportunity of meeting when an honor before she passed away, Mrs. Evelyn Lincoln, says, please don't go, Mr. President. Billy Graham is trying to get in touch with him. Please don't go, Mr. President. Even the psychic Jeannie Dixon says, don't go, Mr. President. Several congressmen are saying don't go. Adlai Stevenson, the ambassador to the UN, is nearly killed there the month before. He says don't go. But he goes to Dallas. It's a whirlwind tour all over Texas. He starts out in Houston. He goes to San Antonio and Austin. He's going to wind up in Austin. And he's making a whirlwind tour here in the Metroplex. Fort Worth, where he gives his last speech. Hour and a half later, he's dead. And then, of course, Dallas. The crowds are just 15 feet deep. Everybody's cheering and rooting for him. They expected tomatoes and apples and eggs to be thrown at the motorcade. No such thing. And as the motorcade is just about ending its parade route in a little park called Dealey Plaza, shots ring out, and the president is mortally wounded. He's rushed to Parkland Hospital, where he's pronounced dead about a half hour later. And they blame a guy by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, which I find fascinating because we have 5 witnesses who see him eating his lunch when the parade goes by. But that's what happens when the shadow government has their plan. And their original, they said there were 3 shots. Actually, there were more like 9, between 9 and 15 shots. But they say there are 3 shots, and the government had the plan predisposed, Brian, to whereby the first shot hits Kennedy, second shot hits Governor Conley, and the third shot hits President Kennedy, all from the rear, all from Oswald's terrible Mannlicher Carcano rifle. And but there's a problem. Number one, Zapruder is filming it on his little 8mm Bell & Howell camera. He owns a dress manufacturing company. I'm going over 30 seconds. So we know the assassination took 6.7 seconds. And we also know that there's a third victim who's wounded by the name of James Tague. Thank God it's just a flesh wound. We're not sure if the bullet grazed him or a piece of concrete flew up from the curb, but a ricochet, but he's wounded. And then everybody knows the first shot missed. So then the government has to backpedal and say, well, since the first shot missed and we have a third victim, James Tague, and Connolly's wounded like 8 times in different parts of his torso and anatomy, then let's come up with a magic bullet theory by Arlen Specter, the ultra-liberal Republican who later betrayed his party, became a Democrat before he died, from my home state of Pennsylvania, and come up with a magic bullet theory that responsible for 7 or 8 wounds in Governor Connolly and 3 wounds in the president. We'll have it exit out his neck. It'll pop up on a stretcher at Parkland, and yari, 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 yari. And so the line is in every encyclopedia, in every American history book, high school and college and grad school, that Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president. And then he is assassinated by Jack Ruby, who's running guns for the CIA and a mobster out of Chicago. Hello. So it was very nicely cut and dried, and the government has done a very good job of keeping it secret. The records aren't supposed to be released for another, 12 years or so. So that was all sealed by Lyndon Johnson. So there you have it. If you don't play the game with the shadow government or the deep state, as you call it, you're either going to get impeached or you're going to get assassinated. In Trump's case, maybe both, and I pray to God that he's careful, that they double down on his security and increase it. And he also has a few of his own bodyguards traveling with the Secret Service because sometimes they get preoccupied with ladies of the evening. Moving along very quickly, Brian, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I remember that from a few years ago. We covered that story where where were they at? They were in South America. I'd have to go through the archives, but it was some of Barack Obama's Secret Service getting busted with ladies of the night. Do you remember where that was exactly, Bruce? Because I'd have to look it up.
I want to say it was Peru. But yes, it was in South America.
Central America,
it was Peru
South
or
America,
Chile or Brazil, one of those.
Yeah, somewhere around there, over in this hemisphere. And when you got those people getting compromised, because you're not just talking about paying a few bucks and getting laid. Look, it's the oldest profession. We understand, we get it, but it's not just about.
But then the Secret Serviceman didn't want to pay the poor lady of the evening, and she threw a tantrum, and
That's
boom,
right.
It's out in the open.
That's how you're right. That's exactly how it happened. So here's the lesson, fellas. If you're ever going to stray, if you're ever going to play, you better pay. That's the lesson that you need to learn from this.
Well, as a man of the cloth, I would tell those Secret Service agents, quit playing on the road, guard the president better, and love your wife when you get off the road. But nonetheless, your point is well taken.
No,
yeah.
and I totally take that. And what I was getting at was, regardless of where we're going to make a moral judgment or determination on the behavior, the fact is that people that are engaging in that type of activity, prostitutes, you have the hookers, you have the pimps. These people are heavily involved in mafia type or gang type infrastructures that will protect them for a certain cut of the action. So when you start messing around in these quarters, you can end up in a particularly compromising situation with photographs or what have you, and then as long as you look the other way, they're going to let you get off scot-free, if you will. And it becomes a very dangerous game of Russian roulette to play. Am I putting that out there in a fair enough term without being too judgy, Bruce?
No, you summed it up not only very accurately, Brian, but very equitably in a fair vein. By the way, the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun, and we hear from our history teachers and profs in high school and college, respectively, that history almost always repeats itself. If you go back to November 21st, 1963, here in Fort Worth, there used to be a hippie club. They were called beatnik clubs back in the late 50s and early 60s, followers of Jack Kerouac, and they had their little French beret and with their little tiny mustache and hey daddy-o, hey man, hey, how you doing, daddy-o, hey, far, it was before the far out took, anyway, so there was a hippie club, and it was basically a beatnik or bohemian nightclub, a leftover from the 50s. And really, the early 60s were kind of a carryover from the 50s, Chubby Checker and the Twist and the Beatniks and everything. And it was in a basement. It was called the Cellar. There were two. There was one on the south side. There was one downtown. And all the Secret Service agents but two the one that responded the day of the assassination, Mr. Clint Hill, who is still alive and has just written a best-selling book, although I think Clint does support the Warren Commission theory, but he is a hero in my book. He did put his life on the line. I don't think he went out drinking that night, and there was maybe one other agent. But the president was left totally unguarded by two unarmed Fort Worth city firemen here in my hometown of Fort Worth now, my adopted hometown. And so they were sitting there with an axe. It's like a scene from Mad Mad World, you know. And so these guys are out painting the town red. Most of them went to the Cellar, this beatnik nightclub, which supposedly did not serve liquor. It was owned by a man with some, allegedly with some underworld ties. I think his name was Pat. Jim Mars knew him well, our mutual friend Jim Mars, you know, who, by the way, also hunts monsters. He's looking for UFOs down here in Stephenville. Great guy. Love Jim. He's the only man in America that knows more about the assassination than me. Maybe Bob Groden. But anyway, I have a friend, Eddie Tate, who used to take his date to the Cellar, and he was there a couple nights before the assassination. But anyway, so all the Secret Service agents were getting drunk or tanked, as Jack Anderson, the late columnist, said. They were painting the town red. So there was no wonder they didn't respond with professionalism and accuracy and urgency when the first shot rang out in Dealey Plaza. So, you know, they were chasing some women and boozing it up, and here we had the same with President Obama, some of his agents in South America. So there's nothing new under the sun.
That is very true, and we could have taken that a couple different directions here, because I originally had a conversation on Easter and the relevance of Jesus Christ as the first topic, but since we spent so much time in your 30 seconds getting into the John F. Kennedy and the assassination that occurred there, and by the way, I'm just busting your chops. I think it is relevant to get a 10-minute overview, a quick synopsis. I'm going to get you down to this 30-second elevator pitch one of these days. That'll be my job as an interviewer, Bruce. The better I get at my job, the better.
Hey, Brian.
Okay,
Brian,
here we
go. Here's your Easter gift.
All right.
I'll reduce it to 10 seconds.
All right, Bruce, hold on. Wait, Bruce, hold on. I got to cue, in post-production, I got to cue the Jeopardy music, and a 1, 2, 3, go. There's no music, but go ahead.
I was waiting for the music. There.
I know.
I was waiting for the music.
I know. I'm a team of one. What can I say? Go ahead.
You want to hum it? Da-dun-da-dun. Anyway, here's the 15 seconds synopsis. President Kennedy gets assassinated. He gets gunned down in cold blood on an American street, November 22nd, 63. They blame this loner named Oswald, who never really fired a shot. He's eating his lunch. 5 witnesses see it. And they blame him. The history books blame him, the Justice Department, but really it was the CIA and the Mafia. How's that?
That's pretty good. And what changed? What direction were we going, and where did Johnson take it after that? Because obviously, maybe not so obviously, but let's just imagine that the people that wanted certain things to stop occurring did this so that we could get a different direction. What changed mostly from the perspective of the people who wanted him dead? What policy shift occurred right after that with Johnson? Was it Vietnam, or was it bigger than that?
Well, it started with Vietnam, and that was the catalyst, because President Kennedy tells Walter Cronkite just a couple of months before the assassination that he is going to withdraw 98% of the troops. They're going to be home by Christmas. They're going to be home in a month or two by December 24th, 25th of 1963. And what does Lyndon Johnson do? The very first act as president, it's basically being planned or going on. Behind closed doors, Lyndon Johnson reverses President Kennedy's withdrawal of the majority of troops and escalates it. That's his first act as president. So obviously, we did not listen to President Eisenhower, who in his farewell speech warned us about this industrial military complex. Now I say we have an industrial media military complex, because the media controls everything, and they're far, 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 far left-wing. But anyway, President Ike warned us, we got to keep our tabs, keep our eyes on this military-industrial complex, because they will come back and bite us, and they did in November 22nd, 1963 here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And so basically, the first thing is the Vietnam War withdrawal reversal by LBJ, while Kennedy's body is not even cold in the grave. Number two, we lost our innocence. Americans were patriotic. Americans were conservative. The Democratic Party was much, much more conservative than the Republicans at that time. We had two conservative parties, one really conservative, the Dems, and we had people that loved America. We had a lot of World War II vets coming home, the greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw said. And all of that went out the window on November 22nd, 1963. And the seeds of distrust in our government were planted. They would later flower more with the assassinations of RFK and MLK, and especially Watergate and Iran-Contra and Monica Gate and the Whitewater Gate and the Benghazi and so forth. It just continues. But what really came to the surface in '63 was how deep this shadow government runs, Brian. How deep this, as you put it, as we hunt monsters, how deep this deep state really is. That the man in the Oval Office is not really pulling the strings. He's a puppet. And boy, was that never, I'm going to get criticized for this from friends and relatives back in Pennsylvania, all of whom are Democrats. They worship the last president, but no more of a president. How should I word this? We've never had a president that was more controlled with puppet and marionette strings than Mr. Obama.
And it seemed like he was playing for the other team 85% of the time. Is it just me?
No, it wasn't you. He played for the Arabic community. He played for the Arab Street in the Middle East. He played for the radical, militant, fascist Muslims, what we call the Islamic extremists and Islamic radicals and Islamic terrorists. He played for the cop killers by hosting and awarding, actually giving, I believe he gave an award to Black Lives Matter because the narrative was this boy was coming out of an Eagle Scout meeting with his King James Bible, walking on the sidewalk, minding in his own business. Darren Wilson pulls him over in Ferguson, a suburb of St. Louis, says, "Get down on your knees," and he starts pumping bullets into the back of his head. When in reality, he had just robbed a store, roughed up a clerk, and as the officer went by and just kindly asked him to move to the side, many black witnesses saw this, eyewitnesses, "Please, young man, could you move to the sidewalk?" No, he reaches into the cruiser and grabs Darren Wilson's gun. And as Darren Wilson is trying to defend him and save his own life, we have this narrative of idiots like Colin Kaepernick, who should be banned from the NFL and really put in prison for being a traitor, pushing this narrative that he's down on his knees begging for his life in his Eagle Scout uniform. The guy was a thug. He was a hoodlum. Let's call it like it is. But Obama honors these cop killers. So we have 5 officers. I went to the funeral. We had the 5 officers killed here in Dallas who were actually protecting Black Lives Matter. And cops being, we had a sheriff deputy ambushed while he was pumping gas at a service station in Houston. And, it seemed like Obama was always playing for the wrong team. He cared more about offending Muslims than he did about defending his own American people.
Yeah, it really was strange because in America, you're allowed to be whatever type of person you want to be. You're allowed to root for and worship whatever or nothing, however you see fit. But the difference is there are certain sects of certain religions that want to impose their will on the other people around them, the people on their street, the people in their communities, and they think they have the right to do that. And that's where this stuff starts getting weird. This is where a lot of people will look at social conservatism and say, yeah, I'm not on board with that. That needs to be libertarian. Everybody needs to pick their own lane, do their own thing, and not have it ruled by some sort of religious edict, kind of like how you'll see Sharia law or you'll see Christians pushing their views onto the general public. The difference is with Sharia law and what's been happening, you've seen it all across Europe. You've seen this stuff with the refugee crisis from Syria. You've seen this where cultures are clashing, and there are people that say, my religion tells me that this is the way things are going to be around me, and if they're not, then I am allowed to XYZ, fill in the blank there. And just because these people want their Sharia law wherever they happen to be. That doesn't mean that that's the way it's going to be. And the backlash of 8 years of Barack Obama running the world, because let's face it, when you become president of the United States, whether you want to admit it or not, Bruce, you become the leader of the world. You are the leader of the world. You're not the head of the United Nations. You're actually the leader of the free world. So what do? Do you lead from behind? Do you help the bad guys gain more strength? Or do you clamp down on the nonsense, and do you act like the parent in the room? You know, we're in a weird situation here where the guy talking about grabbing women by the crotch, he's trying to become the only parent in the room, and there's a lot of people resisting that right now. So I wanted to ask you, we're about 5 months in here on Donald Trump's presidency. What do you make of this whole situation, first beating Clinton, and what you've seen in the past 4 or 5 months?
3 years ago, roughly, 2.5, 3 years ago, I watched my one and only episode. I had not watched it previous, Brian, and I've never watched it since. And I was watching him interview Geraldo Rivera, who was a team captain. I'm going somewhere with the story to answer your question.
Take your time.
There were 2 bakeries in downtown Manhattan, and they were building a cake for charity, and they had to give a report. And of course, they were trying to survive, not hearing Donald saying, "You're fired." And I saw, and it wasn't an act. I have followed Geraldo Rivera's career since he so courageously opened the Kennedy assassination back in with my friend Bob Groden back in the 70s, and was the first one to show the Zapruder film. So he's tough. He's a former boxer. He's half Puerto Rican, half Jew, I think. Grew up in the Bronx. And he's tough. And he was sitting there like a little 8th grader sent to the principal's office for shooting spit wads at the girl in front of him. And he's quaking. And I'm going, that's the guy that needs to be president. Donald Trump. Anybody could make Geraldo Rivera quake in his shoes or his boots as he sits there like an 8th grader being reprimanded by the vice principal of his junior high or middle school. For 3 years I said, if I could wave a wand and put one man in the White House, it would be Donald Trump. We need a leader, a man's man. And I didn't even know where he stood politically. I thought he was a liberal Democrat. But I supported Governor Perry, who's a friend of mine, and then when he dropped out, I switched to Ted Cruz. I've met with Ted twice in Des Moines, Iowa. They actually had me lay hands on Ted and pray for him personally for the power of God in his ministry and in his presidential candidacy. And I campaigned for Ted and so on and so forth. But I was very, very glad because I'll be honest with you, Ted, as great as Ted is, and he's brilliant, and he is a good Christian, he could not have beaten Hillary Clinton. The only person that could have beaten Hillary, even with Benghazi, even with Whitewatergate, even with her affairs, even with Bill's 123 alleged affairs and mistresses and rape cases, and she facilitated them, she still would have beaten any one of those 16 Republicans except Donald Trump. And Donald's not perfect, and he's a man's man, and he's a businessman, but he's doing what he said he would do. We haven't had a guy like that since Reagan and Kennedy. Bush 43 a little bit. Now, I know John B. Wells is not big on the Bush family, and I do agree that Bush 41 and Jeb are CIA all the way. I give Bush 43 a pass because he really didn't want to run for president. He's a strong Christian, a good Methodist, and he was faced with more tragedies and calamities. I mean, he's in there a couple of weeks, and the Chinese shoot one of our spy planes out of the air. And then the space shuttle blows up, and then 9/11, and it was one crisis after another. And the left called him Hitler, a murderer. Can you imagine if we had done that with President Obama, which we shouldn't have done it, but they did it with him, and the media got away with it, and the libs got away with it, and please excuse the French, but this is a scientific term. Not Bill Maher's. Who's the guy that used to be Jimmy Carter's campaign manager on MSNBC? The blonde-haired guy, Chris Matthews. Said he had an orgasm every time that Obama spoke.
The thrill up his leg. He would get the thrill up his leg.
Yeah, thrill up his leg, which Pat Buchanan basically described as, a sensual thing. And so we had these sycophants come out of the media, both the moderate media like Chris Matthews and the far left liberal media like Bill Maher, just worshiping Obama as a god, And so I got to tell you, and I'm going to take a lot of heat for this, I love Trump. I love Donald Trump. I think he's done a fabulous job, and I trust that man. I would trust that man with my life.
Interesting.
Is he perfect? No. He's a sinner. He's a sinner saved by grace. And by the way, he did trust Christ. He's just not broadcasting it. And he's a devout Presbyterian. First president to go to church since Jimmy Carter. Hello. Well, Bill and Hillary would go for a photo op carrying their big Bibles.
I remember seeing the Bushes in there after 9/11 though too. I remember seeing some of that.
Well, yeah. The Bushes did go to church. I take that back, especially Mr. Bush 43 was Methodist Man of the Year, Layman of the Year, and he was a good friend of Billy Graham. So other than Bush 43, we finally have a president that believes in God. And how about his wife crying, quoting Bible verses, singing Amazing Grace, having prayer before she speaks? She's drawn the left crazy because the left says you can't have any religion in politics anymore. We're too PC unless you're Muslim. Now, if you're Muslim, you can have all the religion and politics you want.
It's
Mrs. Trump out there, who is this harlot from Europe, the way the left paints her, and she's invoking the name of God. She's invoking the name of Jesus Christ. She's praying. She's weeping at prayer services, and I think it's great. You know what? The left, great dissertation today, and I would encourage your listeners, I know this may be aired later, but if they would go back to the 17th of April and listen to Rush's monologue comparing Sharia law to the modern Democratic president and modern Democratic Party, and how they completely ignore the Constitution. And here's Trump, who was fairly elected by the most massive landslide since Nixon in 72 and Reagan's two victories in 80 and 84. I mean, you take away 6 cities, take the votes away of Oakland area, Seattle, Washington, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Chicago. Did I say Chicago?
I think so.
And, of course, New York City. You take away the votes of those 6 or 7 cities, and he won by the biggest landslide in American history. And that's why the forefathers had the Electoral College. I used to be against it. I'm for it. So, the left has to get over this. They're acting like a bunch of whining babies. But the problem is they take to the streets. They're funded by George Soros. They're stirring up strife. They're rabble-rousers. They got to get over it. Trump won fair and square. Hey, all you leftists and commies and socialists and liberals and progressives, ultra-liberals, arch-liberals, Mr. Trump is the president. Let's blame it on Hillary, who ran the worst campaign in the history of modern American politics. Oh, it couldn't be Hillary's fault, the fact that she was a very flawed candidate, a very weak candidate, and then she ran the worst campaign. She couldn't even win the ultra-blue states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. She was an awful candidate.
Bruce,
but who did she blame last week? She blames the misogyny of the American male for her loss.
The misogyny. She lost Ohio by, 19 points? Ohio is usually a coin flip. That's usually a coin flip, and she lost by, I think it was 19 points. I'd have to pull it up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, I mean, it wasn't even close. She was horrible, and they were cheating. And all of the media was in the bag for him, and everything you could possibly imagine was on her side and in her favor, and she still couldn't get it done. Oh, my Lord. I got to tell you, I did vote for Donald Trump. I did not officially endorse him.
Did you really? I'm proud of you, Brian. I thought you'd vote for that libertarian kook who didn't know where Aleppo was.
Well, hey, let's give $1,000 to the next American that can find Aleppo on a map, and I'll hold on to that $1,000 for a long time. But no, I did not vote for Gary. Actually, Gary was really weird this last election. He came on my show the last cycle. Everything was really weird, and it got weirder when Bill Weld got involved in the campaign, and then Bill Weld pulled away from his own campaign to endorse Hillary in the final seconds, and you went, okay, this guy was a train wreck from the beginning. But no, I gave Donald Trump very fair coverage. I was harshly critical of Hillary Clinton, and I did not endorse Donald Trump, but I did vote for him. I am so happy that we're at least not controlled by the Clinton crime family right now.
Thank you.
I just kind of want to catch my breath for half a second before I start attacking Donald Trump on this, because that's all the left wing has done nonstop, and it's the boy who cried wolf, or don't assume my gender, whoever it was just cried wolf, because they are going bat-ass crazy right now, Bruce. They have not stopped for 5 months, and it's kind of hilarious, and it's very sad. And I think even they know that they're being ridiculous, but they're being paid, so they're going to keep it up. But I don't think their heart's even in it anymore. It seems really strange. Do you think this is finally winding down, or we're going to see this throughout the entire 4-year term?
We're going to see it throughout the entire 4-year term until we put George Soros in prison for treason. He's financing 80% of these rioters, protesters, rabble-rousers, whatever you want to call them. And it's the same people that you saw at Occupy Wall Street. But no, they're not going to let up, Brian. If anything, it might intensify. They are so, I'm a religionist. I'm a minister. And I believe many of these people are either demon-possessed or devil-oppressed. And I believe there's such a demonic presence over these people that they have actually been deceived. Talking about chasing monsters. I tour haunted houses all over the country. I look into the occult. I study UFOs. And I also study demented people that are delusional. These people are delusional. Hey, but as long as, like you say, as long as Soros and other far-out communists like him finance these protests, they're going to continue. But you're right. I think a percentage of them no longer have their heart in it, and so they're going to go for impeachment through Congress, and they don't have enough votes for that now, or they're going to try to assassinate, as I told John B. Wells, and I pray to God that the good Lord protects Donald Trump. They're going to try to kill him the way they did Kennedy, and they tried to whack Reagan and Truman. Again, they only shoot at the good presidents. So, it's a question of. We've reared a generation, and I know your audience is not going to like this, but we've reared a generation of spoiled brats who have to have their way all the time. They can't handle pressure. School teachers in your state of California can't use red pencils because it might traumatize the little tykes. And universities and colleges have to have safe zones to alleviate some of the pressure. I remember when there used to be 7 suicides a week during finals week at Harvard. Now we can't have backpacks because it'll hurt their backs. We can't have red pens because it'll hurt their psyche as they're graded. And now one college is going to do away with Fs. Everybody in the college is going to get an A or B. Hello. We don't teach history in the classes anymore. We don't teach English in the universities anymore. And so we got a bunch of mind-numbed robots with mushy brains who believe everything Hollywood and Bill Maher and the far-left liberal media tell them. And it's kind of frightening, really. The country has never been this divided since the Civil War, and I would portend, I would submit to your listeners and viewers that it's even more divided than the Civil War.
Well, and I've heard people like Rush saying that we're already in a civil war. That it is an open. It is an open combat.
Excuse me, Brian. I'll turn it back to you. Internationally, World War III started on 9/11, and even prior to that, when the Congress of Iran declared war on us during the Iranian hostage crisis back in the 70s. We're in World War III right now, and we're in a cultural civil war. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you.
No, that's exactly what it is. And Rush has been saying that you have a part of this country that is just defying the president, that is refusing to acknowledge the fact that he's won, and it's an outright rebellion of the system that we have in place. This is, in fact, I forget what he calls it, maybe a soft civil war or something like that. But he's just out there, they're calling it what it is. And this nation has been 50-50 for a really long time. And where we're at right now, a lot of people are really upset, and a lot of people are trying to do anything that they can to throw a wrench in the middle of the machine that runs this system. And we have to figure out what this means and where we go from here. We look around, we see that Donald Trump kind of campaigned like he was Ron Paul, to be non-interventionalist or an isolationist or a libertarian or however the heck you want to phrase it. He was out there telling the crowds that he didn't want to go into stupid wars. He didn't want to end up overextending ourselves and paying trillions of dollars we don't have to fight wars in countries we can't even point out on the map. But then again, we see him bombing an airport in Syria. We see him dropping the Moab over into a facility in Afghanistan that some reports say that our own money paid to build for the Mujahideen against Russia in the first place. And you see North Korea right here. You have Mike Pence standing there looking at all the people from North Korea at the DMZ, like, what's up? He looks like, I saw a meme where it's Ice Cube standing on the front porch with his arms out. He's like, what's up? What's up? You know, he's just looking at, that's Mike Pence looking at North Korea. So, you know, we're trying to figure out what is the Trump doctrine here. And I want to get your take on this, because am I portraying this in an accurate way, that Trump kind of said we should be non-interventionalists, and are you seeing something different, or am I way off base?
No, you're pretty well on target with a couple of caveats. By the way, in total agreement with you are Dr. Mike Savage from your home state there, up north in Berkeley, and Pat Buchanan, two of my favorite conservatives. But they kind of agree with that perception that he kind of campaigned as somewhat of a libertarian, especially on areas of foreign policy. But remember, he constantly said, we're going to kick the HE double hockey sticks. We're going to kick the HE double hockey sticks out of ISIS. He did say that. He also said he was going to secure the borders, and he also said he wasn't going to put up with North Korea. So he kind of played both sides of the fence to get the libertarian vote. I told somebody today, they said, we'll never have an independent president. I said, that's right. A businessman in downtown Fort Worth. I said, we'll never have a third-party president. I don't care if it's Libertarian, Reform Party, Green Party, because of the system. It's fixed against any third party. But I said, we have a third party. We finally have an independent. He looked at me, he says, you're right. I said, yeah, Donald Trump really, truly is an independent businessman. He ran as a conservative Republican with some libertarian leanings, and somewhat of a dove. Pat Buchanan's always been against every war since World War II. I love Pat. I endorsed him strongly for president, gave us the greatest stem winder speech in the history of the RNC, and I love Mike Savage. But I disagree with him on this point. I'm a hawk. Always have been a hawk, always will be a hawk. Teddy Roosevelt, carry a big stick. Ronald Reagan, and speak softly, Ronald Reagan scared the bejeebies out of the Ruskies with Star Wars, which never really existed. See, the communists, Brian, and the Muslims both only understand two things: power and strength. Power and strength. And if you are going to be a weak-kneed, cowardly liberal like President Obama, drawing this imaginary red line and, you know, going back on it all the time, nobody's going to respect you. And then while he's doing that junk, he's also dissing our greatest allies, sending the bust of Winston Churchill back to Great Britain, dissing the French, crossing his legs and frowning every time Benjamin Netanyahu. Those are our three best allies. France is our oldest ally. Britain has fought with us in every war since the 1880s, and Israel is like our 51st state. And he is dissing our allies. So we got a guy in the White House who's finally saying, I'm not going to draw imaginary red lines. I'm not going to put up with Putin. I'm not going to put up with this idiot in North Korea who looks like he's 14 and acts like he's 4. I'm not going to put up with ISIS anymore. I'm going to bomb the HE double hockey sticks out of them. So, yeah, he did kind of, you're right. You and Pat and Mike are right. He kind of campaigned as a savage, as a libertarian, and Savage is ticked off, man. And they're good friends. He and Trump are good friends. He was the first to come out and endorse him. So, no, you're right. But you know what? I say bring it on. You know, the Ruskies will always back down, Brian. Always remember this, because they're atheists. If we go to a thermonuclear war with Russia, and I don't think that's ever going to happen, by the way, but if we do, they're going to back down. They back down to Kennedy with the Cuban Missile Crisis. They back down to Reagan with Star Wars, and they will back down with Trump. Putin is not stupid. He doesn't. This is their heaven. This is their utopia. And so if they get nuked, if Moscow and Leningrad get nuked and Kiev, it's over, baby. So, you know, I say bring it on. I'm tired of having sand kicked in our face when we got the number one military in the history of military science, in the history of civilization. And we fight for right. Are we perfect? No. Do we have strands of imperialism at times? Absolutely. But we fight for republicanism. We fight for democracy. We fight for justice. We fight for human rights. We fight for civil rights. Bless God, we're right 80% of the time. Lincoln was right on most things. Teddy Roosevelt. FDR was even right on some things. Kennedy was definitely right. And you know what? Donald Trump is right on most things. I know it's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, but that's why you make a great radio guest, Bruce.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
That's what you need, you know. I want to throw the alley oop. I don't care how LeBron spins or does a backflip and slams it. Just you handle the dunking and get all the applause. I just want to toss it up there and make sure that it happens. No, it's.
I want to say one other thing, Brian.
Yeah,
I want
go
to say
ahead.
one other thing to your original two questions.
Yeah.
There's a great comedian out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's on Fox News all the time. He now travels with O'Reilly. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, is it Steven Crowder?
No,
oh
the
no,
other guy.
Jesse Waters.
No, he used to be a much more famous stand-up comic. He used to be a liberal. Now he's kind of a libertarian / conservative.
Greg Gutfeld.
No, more famous. Big stand-up comic. He used to have his own show. I'm having a mental freeze. You know, when you get to be 58, that
No,
happens.
this is
He's
great.
from my hometown of Pittsburgh.
No, this is great. Because I have really disconnected from cable news over the past year. I am so out of the loop. I'm not even thinking in those terms.
He used to do Monday Night Football. I mean, this guy's big.
Wait, Dennis Miller?
Dennis Miller. Thank you.
Oh,
You know, we laugh.
Dennis Miller's great. I like him.
What's that?
Dennis Miller is great. I like him. He's very verbose, but he makes quite the conundrums he paints with his verbiage is quite spectacular.
You remind me, or he reminds me a lot of you. Your wit and your sense of humor is very similar, and you're both very analytical. But my point is this: whether it's Dennis Miller or the late Don Rickles, my all-time favorite comedian, or you or me, the conservatives, the constitutionalists, the Christians, most of them, the libertarians, we laugh. You know, we can find humor in anything. Rush Limbaugh is hilarious. Mike Savage is hilarious. You know, Glenn Beck can be very funny. But the left, they're grouchy, they're crabby, they're mean-spirited, they're always negative and pessimistic. Old-time liberalism didn't used to be that way when John F. Kennedy was running it and Robert Kennedy. But they've become a bunch of sourpusses and a bunch of negative Nellies. And everything is bad, and everything's about death, and everything is wrong, and everything America does is always wrong. And you know, we can talk about the world blowing up, and you and I can still, and Dennis Miller, the three of us could still crack jokes and get along with life and be optimistic.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, you have to. If you know, and once again, we just keep bringing him up hundreds of times in the show. It feels like, but John B. Wells, he's like, you know, Brian. This stuff is so serious, you could either laugh or you could cry. So yeah. I choose to laugh. You know, and it's like
exactly.
you gotta laugh at this stuff a little bit.
Impersonation, by the way.
I can do better. I've had the allergies have kicked in all day today. I can do better. Give me a little bit of time. But it's the absolute truth. I mean, the only people that used to be allowed to criticize the king, go back hundreds or thousands of years, it was the court jester. It was the Jay Leno of their time. It was Jimmy Fallon. It was the Bill Maher. It was the comic. It was George Carlin. It was somebody who could look at it and they're allowed to kind of roast you in front of a lot of people, and they'll kind of make a joke at your expense, but hey, you earned it because you're kind of living up to it. And I think there are fair jokes, and I think there's really not fair content. I think a lot of this stuff goes off the rails. I think the left has had such a stranglehold on media for so long, they've started to think that what they were doing was okay. And none of it has been okay for a very long time. And I think this might be the first election where somebody who's savvy enough with social media, somebody who's savvy enough with all of the different ways of communication that are available to us in 2017, somebody finally used it against them. I just always wonder, I ask, what would Martin Luther be doing with Twitter? What would Thomas Paine be doing with Facebook? What would Ben Franklin be doing with Instagram and Snapchat? What would they be doing when they could do something and speak to the entire globe at the same exact time? What would they be doing with this massive thing? And I think Donald Trump, I had John Ziegler, a radio host. He was on my program last week or 2 weeks ago talking about the Jerry Sandusky case and how that was all a setup and it never happened. But he called Donald Trump the best media manipulator of all time. And I think there's some truth to that. I think that he completely cut the media out of the circle with Twitter. He just became his own PR person. And yeah, he'd tweet at 3 in the morning, and some of the stuff would be a little out there. But you know what? It worked. And I think maybe it took a madman to beat a demon. I mean, maybe that's what we're looking at here. This is one of the weirdest elections ever. Maybe that's the only thing that that was going to be able to get past the Clinton crime machine. Maybe it was just the madness of somebody who's very off the cuff, who's not quite political, not quite reserved, doesn't do the double speak. It's kind of the exact opposite. I mean, maybe that's what it is, and maybe that's what's going to be needed to handle these foreign leaders. Maybe I do know this for certain, though, Bruce. I was not happy with how we handled just about anything geopolitically for the past 8 years. I'm pretty close to with you on that one, right?
Yes, absolutely. I from the get-go, I felt that it was a joke. I mean, Obama's in there, 6 weeks, and they give him the Nobel Peace Prize, and he hadn't done one thing, and then he goes on his apology tour all over Europe and the Middle East, blaming America for every ailment in the Middle East and Israel and Palestine and our imperialism and blah, 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 and more blah. Can you see Reagan or Kennedy doing that? I mean, really? Okay, we have a lot of faults. We've had our Watergates and our Whitewaters and our Iran-Contras and our Benghazis, but really, are we the worst country in the history of civilization? It's like your dad one time said they did a remake of the Babe Ruth story. The first one was corny as all get out with William Bendix, Life of Riley character, and it was kind of corny, but like Bob Costa said, it was a good corny, and you loved it. But when they did the remake with John Goodman, and I like John, but when they did the remake, your dad said they made Babe Ruth out to look like Charles Manson. And John Dillinger. They went from making it look like Pollyanna and Superman to the other 180, and now he looks like Manson's the serial killer. And that's the way the foreign policy has been run the last 8 years. We went from maybe a moderate foreign policy under the last couple of presidents, Clinton and Bush. I still can't understand how Clinton gets applauded for the aerial war in Kosovo when he was bombing the wrong side in some instances. Nonetheless, he kept us out of a major world war, as did, Bush 40. We were invaded on 9/11. You got to give him a mulligan for that. But with this president, like you said before, Brian, he was always rooting for the wrong side. And of course, the Boston Marathon did not happen. And the shooting here at Fort Hood, that did not happen. All these terrorist attacks, San Bernardino out in your state, the Golden State. No, those didn't happen. No, all these people are wonderful, and it's like he lived in this imaginary utopia with a euphoric attitude. And if there is a problem, it's the American police, it's the blue, it's our military, it's our allies, England, Canada, Israel, and France, and then to make matters worse, I hate to say this, because when Obama ran the first time, I actually kind of liked the guy at first. Didn't like a lot of his policies, but of course he ran as a moderate, saying he was against abortion and for traditional marriage and for guns. And like all moderate and liberal Democrats, as soon as they get in there, they change those three positions radically right out of the chute. But I kind of liked Obama. Compared to the Clintons, I thought he was sincere. I've never interpreted the Clintons as being sincere. But the difference was the Clintons, in their own warped way, love America, especially Bill. Obama hates America. His wife despises America. They despise our culture, our traditions, our heritage. And we got a man in there. You call him a madman. I would just say he's very eccentric, maybe a little on the spoiled side. But I love Donald Trump, and he loves America, and listen, I started an organization. I'm going to pat myself on the back here a little bit. I'll give the Lord all the credit, give God all the credit this Easter's holy season. But I started an organization called Comet. And Justin, your cousin out in California, helped me with it. We got thousands of coal miners to vote Republican for the first time for Trump. I think that had an impact in Pennsylvania. I still did not expect to win my home state. Comet, coal miners excited for Trump. We called the United Mine Workers, and you should have heard them on the other end of the line. Oh, you can't trust a businessman. But you know what? Those guys related to Donald Trump. How about the motorcycle clubs that endorsed Trump? the truck drivers, those guys would have died for Trump. And as Rush Limbaugh says, the only support he has, it's not Hollywood, it's not the media. They're totally against him. It's not the press. It's not the pop culture. They're all totally opposed to Trump. Certainly not the Democratic Party as a whole. The only support he has are those truck drivers and those coal miners in West Virginia and Kentucky and Pennsylvania that Obama put out of work, and Hillary was going to come in and finish it off and close the rest of the coal mines and the coal gasification plants. And Trump loves America, and he identifies with the blue-collar guy and the middle class and the steel worker like your grandpa Billita was. He loves America. Obama hates America.
And here we are. 2017.
And here we are.
It's a totally different paradigm. It is Mike Pence with his arms open like Ice Cube going, what? What are you looking at, North Korea? Yeah, I see you're looking at me. Take your pictures. I'm standing here with my arms open. What do you got? Because I'm sick of your crap. I mean, it's very different. It's very different. And there are two parts of me. There are two parts of me. Parts of me that want to run from anything neocon, and parts of me that go, look, if we have to have the unenviable task of trying to make sense of this crazy world, yeah, maybe we should play a role in it. However, I will acknowledge all of the messed up stuff that we've been doing in all of these other countries, installing their own puppet dictators, their own situations that are really piloted by Washington, D.C. It's been happening for a very long time. There is a legitimate backlash to it, but once again, I haven't been around for all of that. I'm studying some of it third hand, and I wasn't a part of it. I didn't get to cast a vote in how that was handled. All I know is from here moving forward, how do we figure this thing out? And that's where we're trying to figure out what's going on with this Trump foreign policy. And it would be nice to get North Korea to join the rest of the world. Welcome aboard, everybody. Get this guy out of here. He's a nut job. He's a lunatic. He's that guy on your block that makes everybody uncomfortable. I mean, you know, you see what happens with these people, and I don't know. Somebody's got to be the adult in the room. I don't like being Team America World Police, but I also don't like sitting on the sidelines. So I'm at a bit of an existential crisis in my own mentality, trying to formulate some sort of geopolitical strategy moving forward, because I like what Ron Paul is saying in theory, but then again, if we don't participate on a global scale, well, we saw what happens when Obama doesn't for 8 years. We see a lot of bad people start to get really ballsy and really start to push their weight around. And if you don't check that, it's going to keep growing. And I wonder if that's what happened in the 30s with Hitler. I wasn't around for it, but I can only wonder. Some people look at our side and go, oh, yeah, Donald Trump, he's the Hitler. But then you go, no, like, this could be anywhere. And all this nationalism, all the critiques of nationalism, Europe has been undergoing a monstrous culture war. There has been so much infiltration / migration from Syrian refugees. It is a dangerous place over there in Europe right now, and there are a lot of different leaders starting to take the forefront in their elections that are going to run these people out of town too. And you go, okay, most of the people are kind of thinking the same thing here. If you pull the politics away from this stuff, it's not a bad thing to want people to hang out with you that are going to be cool to you and want to keep things peaceful, and then there's groups of people that don't. It's really two different groups. Do you want to take over the world, or do you want to, as the libertarian meme shows, libertarians plotting to take over the world and leave you alone? That's their philosophy. So, you know, it's a strange place we find ourselves in, Bruce. If let me ask you it this way: if Donald Trump were not taking the forefront here, bombing the airport in Syria, if he wasn't dropping the Moab in Afghanistan, you know, if he wasn't staring down the North Koreans, what do you think would happen if let's say there was a fourth I'm sorry, a third Obama term in terms of Hillary Clinton. What if she was in charge? What do you think she would be doing geopolitically right now? Just to play devil's advocate, what would it be if Trump wasn't here?
Boy, that is a tough question. By the way, I got to address two of your points, your sub-points, before I answer that question, but it's all integrated and related. I told a man today that I could never be a libertarian, ever, along with the American Libertarian Party, even though I have a lot of libertarian philosophies. For instance, I think you ought to be able to, I preach all over America against drugs, tobacco, alcohol, et cetera, but I think you should have the right to do in your house whatever you want to do. I really have a lot of libertarian strains in my political philosophies, but the American modern Libertarian Party, with people like Gary Johnson, I have three problems with them. Number one, they're isolationists. Number two, they're either neutral or anti-Israel. And number three, they're for the legalization of all drugs. I just can't go down those three roads. But I do respect the libertarians, and they're part of our movement, and I love them. And I know in the past you've identified with them. So I wanted to address that. Number two, the allies are coming to Trump's side. They're saying we finally got a guy in the Oval Office that says what he means and means what he says. My friend Bill Cunningham, by the way, Bill said on international radio the other during the campaign, I was on his show in November. He said, "Man, if I lived in Fort Worth, I'd go to Bruce Engelman's church." He told the producer, he said, "We got to keep on this guy and get him on the show." That great American, Bill Cunningham, the attorney from WLW in Cincinnati, he was saying Sunday night, just last night, that Easter Sunday night, that we finally got a man in the White House that basically backs up what he says. And I'm not a neocon. I am not a Lindsey Graham, John McCain, Paul Wolfowitz, Jeb Bush neocon. I am not. But I am a hawk when we're attacked, or when this Kim Jong mentally ill boy, Young Jung Mung, whatever his name is, says he's going to nuke America the first chance he gets, and Ahmadinejad, the outgoing president of Iran, says he's going to nuke Israel and America the first chance he gets. I take those threats very seriously. I really do. Just like I took the threat seriously, and Bill Clinton and his staff, Madeleine Albright, didn't when Osama bin Laden said he was going to attack America, and he eventually did on 9/11. What would Hillary do? It's very strange because Hillary was provoking a war with Russia during the campaign.
Yeah,
if anybody was colluding with the Russians, it was Hillary, not Trump. And by the way, have you noticed all this has died down a little bit? Oh, the Russians threw the election. It was a fixed election, and Putin controlled the election. Well, now that Trump is bombing with all these Tomahawk missiles, their number 3 ally, that being, of course, Syria, we're not hearing so much that Trump is in bed with Putin. It's amazing how the left switches very quickly.
Well, how about that, Bruce? How about the fact that Susan Rice, she has been now linked to all of this. She has now been outed, if you will, as the person who unmasked information so that they could surveil the people around Trump to get to Trump. And that this, if you want to throw Nixon out for Watergate, oh, brother, this is 100 times whatever Watergate wishes it could have been. Am I close on that one?
Susan Rice should be indicted just for her lies on Benghazi alone. Pathetic, absolutely pathetic. Going on 6 talk shows the Sunday morning after Benghazi, linking it to a video that literally nobody saw. And we have Hillary on tape telling Chelsea, "Hey, we're going to drum up support for this video that nobody saw and blame all the attacks in Benghazi on this video, and it'll get the press off our case and deflect it for Obama's reelection." Blah blah blah. Susan Rice should be indicted. If I could put her in prison, if I could prosecute her, I would. She is the biggest liar in postmodern American political history. You're right. She makes Richard Nixon look like a Sunday school superintendent. She is a compulsive liar. She's a shill for Obama and Hillary. And, of course, Hillary's never told the truth in her life. We know that. But what would Hillary do? I don't know. She's a sociopath. What would she do? She was her and Susan were colluding with the Russians and blaming it on Trump. And by the way, they were bugging his headquarters with modern surveillance. The Democratic Party did cheat. He said what, they stole 30 million votes. It was more like 90 million votes. Everything Trump says winds up being true. course, the press isn't going to cover that. So I don't know. Hillary was provoking a war with Putin, and yet she is so stinking ultra-liberal, and she's half a step away from Putin. I mean, Hillary is an ultra-socialist. She's a far, far, far left-winger, much more so than Bill. Bill was a pragmatist, centrist Democrat from the South. He was for capital punishment. He was for some tax cuts. He was for a strong military. You know, Bill was a pragmatic, stick your finger up in the wind with your wetted finger, but he had some conservative viewpoints. He was a good old boy from the South, and that part of him I did respect. I didn't respect his fling with Monica and him cheating constantly behind Hillary's back, but Hillary is an avowed socialist. He is a radical liberal. She used to be a Republican. Can you believe that, Brian? In college, she headed up the Republican Party at Wellesley. But she's to the left of Obama anymore. And it's crazy. It's crazy. So here we have this far, far, far left-winger, the former First Lady, who is wanting a war. I mean, it's crazy. She wants a war with Russia. And she was mad that at first it looked like Trump was going to be a libertarian. And, hey, by the way, Nancy Pelosi still thinks Mr. Bush is in the White House. Talk about senility. You talk about funny. You talk about hilarious.
Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi and all of these people, I don't know why they're not out to pasture at this point. Can we please put in?
John McCain should be in a nursing home and the oatmeal slipping into his lap. John McCain has been totally senile with stage 4 dementia for 20 years. And Nancy Pelosi and Waters, she thought North Korea was invaded by the Russians. I mean, these people are senile. What are they doing in there?
I just wonder how compromised and bought and sold they have to be to still keep those positions. What value are they still bringing to the table? How far gone are their souls? How long ago did they sell whoever they used to be as a human for the almighty dollar? So let me ask you, can we just go ahead and say that term limits would be a great idea because of both Lindsey Graham and John McCain on one hand, or Maxine Waters, Dianne Feinstein, or Nancy Pelosi on the other side? Are you in favor of term limits? Is there anything I haven't considered where I should maybe reconsider that?
No, if you go back and look at boy, am I going to raise ire here. You're going to hear about this comment from your listeners. You're going to get emails from this one. If you go back and look at forget slavery. The Civil War was not fought over slavery. Mike Savage said that this week. Any real historian knows that. It's ridiculous, and we've been force-fed that and spoon-fed that all of our lives, that the Civil War was either fought only over slavery or primarily over slavery. If you extract the one issue of slavery and look at the platform of the Confederate Party headed by Jefferson Davis, they were for term limits, they were for the line item veto, they were for states' rights politically, not racially. What we're fighting for now, the old Confederacy was fighting for. The 4 men on Stone Mountain. You're not going to hear this in any northern public school or university. The 4 men on Stone Mountain, which is the Mount Rushmore of the South. Those 4 men were vehemently opposed to slavery. Stonewall Jackson's best friend was a black man, a cook in his company, in his regiment, and he integrated white Presbyterian churches all throughout Virginia and what's now West Virginia, bringing black people into white churches against the law of Virginia at the time. Robert E. Lee hated slavery and was the top general of the Union Army. Lincoln begged and Stanton begged him to take the Union forces because he was such an honest, good Christian man and a great tactician. And Judge Stewart was a fantastic born-again Christian who hated slavery. Jefferson Davis said if we can avoid fighting this war, slavery is going to go by the way of attrition like it did in England because of the writer of Amazing Grace, John Newton, and his convert in Parliament. So I say all that to say you're spot on. You are spot on. We need term limits. We have it for the president now, finally. Thank God, or Obama would still be in there. And if FDR were alive, he'd still be in there. It's like Archie Bunker said one time. Maude goes, her cousin-in-law, Archie, you voted for FDR the first time. He goes, yeah, the first time, but I didn't know he was going to hold on to the job like a pope. You know, But we don't have term limits for congressmen and senators. Why not? These people are I mean, we're talking stage 3 dementia. We're talking stage 4 Alzheimer's. Nancy Pelosi actually thinks Bush is still in the White House, and what's her name? The Waters. What's her name?
Maxine Waters.
Maxine Waters thinks Russia was invading North Korea. I mean, these people, and John McCain, he can't find his way home at night. What is going on? We pay these people buku dollars, and by the way, if I were a Democrat right now, I'd be embarrassed that my leadership was Nancy Pelosi and Miss Waters and that mafia guy from New York. What's his name? Well, they got 2 mafia guys running the party. Schumer from New York and Durbin from Illinois.
Yeah, I was thinking Schumer over there. Amy Schumer's, what was it, cousin or uncle or something? Amy Schumer, man, she put out one of the least funny, and I saw a lot of people, because the new Netflix, hang on, let me back up for a second. The comedy specials that used to be the HBO comedy specials, now they've moved over to Netflix. So now you have a Netflix special. And man, Amy Schumer's Netflix special was horrible. It was so unfunny. It was ridiculous. And she force-fed this anti-gun thing in for like 3 minutes. It wasn't funny. It didn't have a flow. It had no point in the middle of it, and it was terrible. And it was the worst thing I've seen from a Schumer until I saw the other relative talking out of his butt. You know, almost everything he brings up is just ridiculous garbage. It's really unfortunate. I don't know why so much of our country is this backward on so many of the important issues of the day. I just, Bruce, I don't get it. It makes me wonder if it's a little discouraging sometimes. And you go, well, if there's that many dumb people, why am I even bothering? Or is it because so many people have been believing a lie for so long, it's up to people like us to try to set the record straight? That's the question. And I don't know if we still have him. Bruce, we still there? How the heck am I going to set him up with this question now? I have no idea. That's the problem with my long-winded answers / conversions into questions. I don't remember exactly how to get him up to snuff again. All right.
Reverend Bruce Engelman here.
Yes, we have you on the line. Where did I leave off? Because that was a very long answer / transition into a question.
We were talking about the senility of John McCain, Miss Waters, and Nancy Pelosi. And if I were a Democrat, I would be so embarrassed that the leadership of my party, including the mafia-appointed Dick Durbin in Illinois and Chucky Schumer in New York, I would be humiliated with these jerks running my party. The party of Kennedy and Truman and FDR and Woodrow Wilson, these two-bit little Napoleons, these two-bit shadow government appointees who have small minds and care more about partisan politics than they do about the future of this country. And what was Chuck Schumer giving an inaugural speech at Trump's inauguration for? I've never heard of the like. He's quoting that poem at the end of episode 1 of PBS's Civil War. I mean, really? I mean, who gave him the platform? That was Trump's day. Chucky Schumer up there. I mean, this country has lost its cotton-picking mind, Brian.
So that's my question, Bruce, and that is kind of where I was getting at. Is it so far gone it's not worth even caring about anymore? Or are the important issues won in the 5 to 10% in the middle that are willing to listen to reasonable conversations and choose the most likely, maybe not the most likely, but to choose the best argument when it's put to that? What do you say? Is it worth even messing around, wasting our time on? Or do you think that there's a purpose behind it? Do you think that it's going to matter?
No, I think it definitely matters. I do believe that God hit the pause button. Remember the old VCRs? VHSs had a pause button.
Oh yeah.
I believe that Jehovah God has hit the pause button and has given America one last chance as a evangelical or fundamentalist Christian, I do believe that America was beginning to be under some severe judgment after 9/11 for a myriad of reasons and a multitude of anti-biblical positions. But suffice it to say, I believe I'm an optimist. I'm not a Pollyanna, but I am an optimist. And I believe, as you do, how often have we said it's Engelman's, it's what we do? Who gave Brunswick a chance? You guys made it to the state dance 1 year and almost 2 years in a row, and you had the big play against Massillon, and you weren't the biggest guy in Cleveland. Your brother was regarded as one of the top players until he blew his knee out, and Coach Tom Fasco said, if we have Engelman, we win, meaning Chris. Justin stands up and catches a bat that 50 people dive for cover. We're Engelmans. That's what we do. We win. And the thing about Trump that I like, too, he's a winner. He's a winner. And we can't quit. We can't quit. Those boys that scaled the heights at Normandy on June 6, 1944, as they were being shot down upon by excellent German sharpshooters with their tremendously accurate German rifles and machine guns. We owe it to them to keep going. We owe it to the sailors and Marines that died at Pearl Harbor. We owe it to the Confederate soldiers that raced up on Pickett's charge at Cemetery Ridge in Gettysburg. We owe it. We owe it, Brian. We owe it to all the soldiers that died on the bleak slopes of Korea and the steaming jungles of Vietnam. We owe it. We owe it to all these Marines and sailors and soldiers and airmen who've died in Iraq and Afghanistan and throughout the Middle East. We owe it to them. We can't quit. We can't let up. And it's not for us. It's for your grandchildren and your grandnephews and grandnieces. It's for the future. And good Americans like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, they never quit. They never, Stonewall Jackson, Patton, they never quit. MacArthur never quit. And so I think we have a chance. We have all three houses now. We have the Senate, we have Congress, and actually all four chambers. We have the presidency, and we have the Supreme Court with Gorsuch, who is the best candidate since Oliver Wendell Holmes and Scalia himself to get in there. We have a chance. We need to take this country back. We need to take this country back for patriotism, for nationalism, for our traditions as the 1950s. Go ahead and make fun of Beaver Cleaver, but it was a lot more relaxed and comfortable and safe. Okay? We need to take America back. We need to take our culture back. We need to take our borders back. We need to take our language back. We need to take our states back. We need to take our cities back. That poor black man that was gunned down in Cleveland, and there's a manhunt going on right now. We need to, without taking the guns away, because that's what the liberals always want to do. Gun control, gun control, gun. We didn't hear anything about gun control for 3 years after 9/11 because they used razor blades and box cutters and box knives. Hello. But the left always wants to take away guns. That's their knee-jerk reaction to every little attack and tragedy. But we need to take it back for sportsmen, for hunters and fishermen, for people like Ted Williams, the greatest hitter of all time, that was a fighter pilot for the Marine Corps in both World War II and Korea. We need to take it back for John Wayne, as hokey as that sounds. Brian, I am optimistic. I think we have a fighting chance. And if this country would turn from its extreme immorality and cultural pluralism, and hey, it's an uphill fight because we got to take back the colleges and the universities and the public schools and teach these kids the Civil War was not fought over slavery, and Oswald didn't kill the president. The mafia and the government did. And hey, I'm optimistic, man. Let's go for it.
All right. Well, then why can't we repeal Obamacare? Final question on this front. Why can't we
repeal Obamacare? Because the Republican Party is so divided. Go ahead. Finish your question.
No,
I got a good answer for you. I think I know where you're.
Yeah, go ahead. That's it.
Okay. I explained this to my staff. My staff asked me the other day, they said, Pastor, would you come in and explain to us why everybody is against Trump and the Republican Party cannot repeal Obamacare? And I said, here's the reason. And I got 4 chairs, and I showed my secretaries and my staff. I said, this one chair represents the old mainstream Republican Party, conservatives, moderates, and liberals. I said the second chair represents guys like me and ladies like you and guys like you that are Reagan conservatives. We are Tea Partiers. We are constitutionalists with a lot of libertarian leanings. We are the true right wing of the Republican Party. Then the third section of the party are the neocons, headed by ultra-liberals like John McCain, and liberals like moderates and liberals like Lindsey Graham and Jeb Bush and so forth. And then over here, I said you got your far left wing Republicans who also you can throw in for good measure. You can throw in the Democrats that voted for Trump. He's got to appease all four of these factions, Brian. He's got to appease the traditional mainstream Republicans, headed by guys like Paul Ryan. He's got to appease guys like me, who are Tea Partiers and Reagan conservatives. He's got to appease the neocons, and then he's got to appease the modern Reagan Democrats who voted for him, all the coal miners in Pennsylvania that always voted Democrat, and all the ultra liberal Republicans. I would put John McCain also in that category. So the Republican Party never cooperates on anything. They're schizophrenic, man. I mean, the Democrats, one thing you could say about the modern Democratic Party, the postmodern Democratic Party, is they stick together. We shoot our own wounded in the Republican Party. And by the way, you got the Libertarians. I told my staff, you got the Libertarians, and you can kind of put them over in that fourth wing. So poor Donald Trump's got to appease all these people. And when he says that Obama left him a mess, I want to tell you something. I ran a mayoral campaign for one of the big suburbs in Chicago back when I was in seminary. I was the co-campaign manager. And our biggest puzzle, our biggest question, I represented the Republican candidate in a Democratic city. What are we going to do when we win? If we win this, the mayor was actually a good guy, but the party in all of Chicago is controlled by the mafia. And there was so much organized crime in that city hall in that one Chicago suburb. We're going to have to go in there and drain the swamp. We're going to have the police surround City Hall the next day. We were preparing for World War III. Well, think of Trump taking over the White House after it's been controlled by the mafia and the Muslims for the last 8 years. I mean, and the radical left and the media. I mean, he does have a problem. He was dealt a terrible hand in this poker game of politics. I feel sorry for Donald Trump. Everybody felt sorry for Obama when he took in there because of the economy. Well, I feel sorry for Donald Trump because he's white and because everybody's against him.
Yeah, I would definitely say that when Obama came in after what Bush was handing him, that was a hot potato. That was a ticking egg timer. Here you go. You deal with it. Walking away, your problem. I mean, the economy was crashing to bits. In that case, but now we got the Dow over 20,000 for the first time ever. People are confident. People are at least looking around saying, yeah, you're dropping some bombs. You're warning some people. You're not blowing up hospitals. You're blowing up some airfields. You're blowing up some infrastructure. And you're looking North Korea in the face saying, are you going to make me do this? I just did it 2 other places. Are you going to make me do this again? I am not Barack Obama. Do not talk to me or treat me like I'm Barack Obama. Are we cool or are we not cool? You know, I don't know that this is the worst thing that a U.S. president has done, given the fact that if we don't participate on a global scale, that nothing's going to happen. And in the absence of something happening, you see the rise of ISIS, which we saw under Barack Obama. You see this type of stuff. So it's very interesting times. It's very interesting times, and I don't know why we can't repeal Obamacare. I don't know why Paul Ryan doesn't have a plan after all these years. Why Mitch McConnell? Why John Boehner while he was there? Nobody could put this together. This isn't complicated. Just increase competition. Find a way to, and they're stuck. So it's a grab bag when you go for somebody saying, "Hey, I like him because he's not a political insider." Well, okay. Well, here's what happens when you don't have a political insider. They're going to stumble when it comes to passing legislation because they haven't cut the right deals. So, it is part of the deal. It is part of the whole grab bag of things that are happening right now. And Bruce, it's interesting because we tried to get together to do this show on Easter, and we've pretty much run out of time because I wanted to ask you if Jesus Christ is still relevant. I wanted to bounce to another couple of topics. So how about this? What if I hit reset? I did our show liner, just kind of did a reset, and we could split it in post-production. We could post the show in its entirety, or we could split off these segments. What if I split off for a segment on Easter and then a segment on sports? Would you be okay with that? Maybe a 5-5 or something like that. And maybe if
How about a 10 and 10? I'm game.
Okay, then let's do it. My name's Brian Engelman. You are listening to Agree to Disagree here at thenewamericanmedia.com. Bruce, where do people go if they want to find more information about you, by the way?
Yes, they can go on the website. In fact, we just started a new TV show. I have an interview program that's being streamed right now. It's called Just a Chat. Pastor Bruce Engelman. I interview very interesting guests. I can't wait to have you on. And we do everything from politics to religion to organized crime to the Kennedy assassination to Trump to current trends in so-called American Christianity. They can go on BaptistTemple.com. They can go on the name of our church, TriumphBaptistChurch.com in Fort Worth. They can just Google my name, and all kinds of crazy things will come up, including many great interviews that you conducted with me over the years on Agree to Disagree and New American Media. They can bring up John B. Wells' program. So just type in Bruce Engelman, Engelman, or Triumph Baptist Church, and Google that in Fort Worth, Texas, and a myriad of things will come up. Or they can write to me if they like snail mail. Your old timers that are listening or watching can write to 3300 West Seminary, just like the school where ministers go, Seminary, West Seminary Drive, a legendary street in Fort Worth. That's Fort Worth, Texas, 76133. That's 3300 West, or capital W period, Seminary Drive, Fort Worth, 76133. The fastest growing city in America right now is Fort Worth, Texas. We just passed up Las Vegas in the last census. So, yeah, they can get in touch with me many, many ways. And they can write to me. They can email me. My email address is as follows. It's BANDCENGELMAN, that's my last name, 2013, this year I got married, at Gmail, G as in Gary.com. Let me repeat that, B as in boy, AND, C as in Charlie, and then my last name, ENGELMAN, all small case, 2013 at gmail.com.
Excellent. Bruce, let's pause. We're going to come right back, and we're going to ask the question, is Jesus Christ still relevant? Yes, maybe in an ideal world where you didn't have two Engelman talking and catching up for the first time in far too long, because we're way more interested in geopolitics than we are the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And are you converted, by the way? We had to talk about all this stuff going on with North Korea, with Afghanistan, with Syria, the nonsense, the transition, the new president. And we didn't even get to like the core, the gist of why we wanted to have this conversation in the first place. But in post-production, we'll split this up, and it'll be its own segment, so you can listen to the whole show in its entirety, or you can check out piece by piece by piece. Coming up, this is going to be a very important time, everybody. If you have not participated in assisting our efforts here at the New American Media, I'm telling you that 2017 is the year to do that. We are going full bore on our Patreon account. What is it? Patreon.com/The New American Media, because the old American Media has failed us. We're looking for people to sponsor us. I feel like we're PBS. I need to get some tote bags or some sort of CDs of opera classics that I could offer you at the $50 pledge level. But really, that's what it's coming down to. YouTube and Facebook, all of these platforms, Twitter, they're all starting to regulate and demonetize their content. It is something that we all need to be aware of. We got to be careful of. We have to kind of project for. So we're looking for as many people that want to support what we're doing as possible. Check us out at Patreon, patreon.com, patreon.com/The New American Media. We'll be right back on the other side. We're going to ask the question, is Jesus Christ still relevant?
Your guide to the truth, thenewamericanmedia.com.
All right, everybody, if you're listening live, that took just a matter of seconds. If you're listening after the fact, thank you very much. Please check out all the previous programs. Go to youtube.com/The New American Media. Click subscribe. You're going to like it. We have almost 1,000 videos. We have 1.3 some million views. We have 6,000 some subscribers. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between the recording of these programs. Leave your thoughts. Leave your comments. It will encourage a conversation on the page, and that's what we want. We want a mostly civil conversation where people can discuss this type of stuff. So please check it out, subscribe, join our team, link up with us, and have a chat with us after the fact. I am talking with Bruce Engelman. Yes, that last name is familiar. That is my uncle. That is my blood. He's a pastor. He's a Baptist preacher down in Fort Worth, Texas. He is my father's brother, and we always get together to talk sports, we talk politics, we talk spirituality. Never necessarily in any particular order, because there are some days we really would rather talk about LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, some days we'd rather talk about Albert Bell and the Cleveland Indians, and some days we'd rather talk about, the metaphysical existence and experience that we're all walking through on a daily basis and what it means to be here in this video game called life. So right now I wanted to talk with Bruce about Jesus Christ. We just celebrated Easter. Unfortunately, that madman in Cleveland kind of tried to steal the show. We don't want to allow him to do that. However, the fact remains, he's on the loose. He is on the lam. He is somebody 6 foot. He kind of looks like Suge Knight. Bald head, full beard, glasses. No, I'm sorry, not glasses. Full beard, bald head. He's driving... What the heck is he driving? Temporary tags 363630, I believe. If my
a white van or a white SUV, wasn't it?
Yeah. Hold on. I have it. Where the heck was that? I had it right in front of me, and then I think I filed it. I did a show on it earlier today. What the heck? Anyway, I'll look it up. But anyway, the point is this: we got a madman in Cleveland, and we don't want to lose track of what's going on. You'll always have bad people that are trying to go ahead and kind of hijack what's going on. This is supposed to be an Easter celebration. Some say it's a Christian tradition to carry on what the pagans were doing thousands of years beforehand. But this case, by the way, I pulled it up in front of me so I don't screw this up. 6 foot or 6'1", 240 pounds, bald head, full beard, kind of resembles the rap mogul Suge Knight. If you see him or the car, call 911 for assistance. Don't get involved. His license plate number, it's a temporary tag. E is in Edward, 363630. It's a white Ford Fusion. So please share that until we can get this monster either in a cage or 6 feet underground. And of course there are some false flag commentary going on with the New American media. People are questioning if this is real, if it's not real. Anyway, the point, Bruce, Pastor Bruce Engelman, Uncle Bruce, if you will. Thank you for sticking around for another segment with us. But we want to kind of talk.
You bet.
I want to talk for a second about Jesus Christ. You're a pastor. You're down in Fort Worth, Texas, where God is real and people actually still care. I'm out here on the heathen West Coast. It is what it is, but it's definitely a different scenario than where I grew up in the middle of, suburban Ohio, which is much, much, much different than central Los Angeles. So I don't know, just as a pastor, talk to me about what Easter means to you in 2017 in America.
Great question, Brian. I'll be glad to attempt to tackle that very complex question, but it really has a simple answer, and that is yes, an emphatic yes. Jesus Christ is not only relevant today in 2017, he's more relevant than ever. And Easter itself represents the greatest single day in all of history, and that's the day of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. It wasn't the landing of Neil Armstrong on the moon. That was a great and historic day. It wasn't, your Uncle Cal used to say that the biggest day in history was D-Day, the Normandy invasion, to liberate France on the Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944. That was a huge day, and a lot of heroes died on the beach of Normandy in Omaha. But it wasn't D-Day. It wasn't Christopher Columbus discovering America. That was a fantastic day. The greatest day in history is the bodily and physical resurrection out of the tomb of Christ. I've been in that tomb 3 times. I've been to Israel, and I'm happy to report to your listeners and viewers that it is still empty. We go to tombs. Lenin is immortalized in a glass casket or coffin in a museum in Russia, and he's the father of modern communism, along with Engels and Marx, of course, but basically one of the tri-fathers of communism and atheism. His body is in it. You go in there to look at a body in the tomb. President Garfield is laid out with his wife in a rotunda in your hometown of Cleveland. I've been there. You go to see I've been to Jefferson's grave and tomb. I've been to George Washington's. I've seen his and Martha's, concreted grave. I've been to Kennedy's grave many times. We go to see these people and either their tombs or their graves or their crypts. But we go to Calvary and the Garden of Gethsemane in the Garden Tomb to see an empty tomb. Years ago, back in the 1870s, the war had just ended between the states. I call it the War of Northern Intervention. But the war had just ended, and there was a general on a train traveling to a city on business, and his name was General Lew Wallace. He had been a Union general for the Northern Army, and little did he know on that plane was a colonel that he knew very well, Robert Ingersoll, who had his own private berth. And so he sent a porter to get General, tell him his old friend Colonel Ingersoll is back here, and if he'll come back, I'll give him a drink. And so they went back there. He went back there. The porter took him back, and they embraced, and of course they knew each other well. Robert Ingersoll was a very famous atheist. They used to call them infidels. And he was writing many books and papers on how God didn't exist and Jesus Christ was a fantasy. And Lew Wallace believed in God and kind of believed in Jesus, but he wasn't a believer. He wasn't what we call a born-again Christian or a Bible-believing Christian or an evangelical Christian or a Spirit-filled Catholic or Orthodox Christian. He just kind of intellectually believed in God. And so they got into kind of an argument, and they debated for about 2 hours in a friendly argument back there in that Pullman compartment where Ingersoll was staying, and quite literally he tore him to shreds. Lew Wallace would later say, man, I better start studying my Bible. Well, they agreed to meet a year later because he lost the debate so severely. He did tons of research, especially on the resurrection, Brian, of Jesus Christ, and he became a believer. He asked Christ into his heart and into his life and trusted Jesus Christ as his personal Savior. And so he met this famous infidel, Robert Ingersoll, a year later. And he said, there's been two changes. He said, number one, he says, I set out to prove the resurrection didn't really happen, or I wasn't sure about it, but I also studied the Bible so I could debate you, because I do believe in God. I'm not a total atheist like you, Colonel. And he says, so I've become a true believer. I am now a follower and disciple of Jesus Christ. But number two, I started writing a novel, and I think I'm prepared to debate you. And that novel was called Ben-Hur, made into a movie which was up for 11 Academy Award nominations back in the late 50s with Charlton Heston. A man actually died in the chariot race. The movie's been remade. I haven't seen the remake. That was the bestseller from about 1879 to about 1920. The only book that sold more copies, Brian, in the United States was the King James Bible at that time. Ben-Hur was the biggest bestseller year after year after year until Margaret Mitchell penned Gone with the Wind in Atlanta, Georgia, her only work, by the way, which became a movie in 1939 with Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh. And so it has been called one of the top 3 or 4 books in the history of American Christianity. There's another fellow that was tired of the campus ministries bugging him, Campus Crusade for Christ, Campus Coalition for Christ, Youth for Christ, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Athletes in Action, Athlete Outreach International. They were always witnessing to this kid. He was a college kid. And he was so sick of the Bible thumpers and Jesus freaks, he started going to the university library to prove the resurrection never happened. He was an agnostic, which means he did not believe at all in God, but he wasn't emphatic about it like the atheist and the infidel. He basically said, if somebody could prove it to me, I'll believe it. I just don't know. For, agnostic for believing. I just don't know. So as an agnostic, but trying to get these campus witnessers, these campus ministry kids off his back. He goes to the university library and he piles up all these history books and all these religious books. He wound up proving that there was more evidence to prove not only the existence of Jesus Christ, but the happening of the resurrection than there was to prove the existence of our first president and the father of our country, George Washington. He became a born-again believer. His name is Josh McDowell. He wrote a bestseller called Evidence Demands a Verdict, and then he followed it up with another bestseller called The Resurrection Factor. And so it is the greatest event in history. And, back in 1965, there were only 6 mega churches in America. They were all independent Baptist. You had the Akron Baptist Temple right in your backyard, not too far from Brunswick, with Dallas Billington, an old rubber worker from the tire factories, just a hillbilly from Kentucky, started a church that was running 20,000. There was First Baptist Church of Hammond under Jack Hiles. There was a Emmanuel Baptist Church in Pontiac under Tom Malone. There was Lee Robertson in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and J. Frank Norris and Fort Worth here simultaneously pastored the two largest churches. Oh, and William Bell Riley, First Baptist Church of Minneapolis. That was it. There were 6, 7, or 8 mega churches that ran well over 5,000 every Sunday. The average church back in those days was about 120. The average medium-sized church was about 300 to 400. Now, in every city, Brian, you have 4 or 5 mega churches running over 10,000. There are 3 or 4 Christian TV networks. There are millions of missionaries that are headed out all over America. And I would pose this question to your listeners and viewers. Is every Catholic wrong? Is every Greek Orthodox wrong? Is every Russian Orthodox wrong? Is every Latvian Orthodox, every Serbian Orthodox? Is every Lutheran wrong? Is every Presbyterian wrong? Is every Pentecostal, every Assembly of God wrong? Is every Church of Christ member and every Church of God member wrong? Is every Baptist wrong? Is every Methodist wrong? Is every Mennonite wrong? Is every Amishman wrong? Is every Quaker and Shaker wrong? Are all these billions and trillions of people? There have been millions of churches built in the honor of Jesus Christ over the years of all different denominations. Literally millions of churches have been built in his honor. Is this just a figment of our imagination? Are all Protestants, Baptists, Catholics, and Orthodox wrong? I submit to you they're not. And I think Jesus Christ in these very untenable times, these very shaky and shallow and unstable times, these what I call very dangerous times, the only rock that we can put our trust in is the Bible, the written word, and the living word, Jesus Christ.
Well, what do you do for the people that are very cautious to put faith and trust in governments? People that are not willing to accept the official interpretation, the official explanation, the official word from governments across this world. If you want to understand what religion is, it's the greatest socializing tool in the history of mankind. If you want people to behave, you just tell them they're going to be judged in the next life, so they better not do bad stuff when nobody catches them, or else, hey, there's a big guy that's going to catch you, and it makes their job easier. So what do you say to the people that don't trust government, they don't trust the concept of religion, maybe they're open to the concept of an afterlife or some sort of continuing existence pre-Council of Nicaea before Jesus' magic was edited out of the Bible by the King James Version? What would you say to some of those people when it comes to thinking about what is the purpose of why we're here on this planet in 2017? Why does it matter? What would you say to them?
First of all, I'm impressed that you know the Council of Nicaea. Most seminary graduates don't even know what that was. I would answer your question this way. In postmodern America, as it is commonly referred to by sociologists and modern historians, you have two gods with a small g. But I do believe the one G is capitalized because it's referencing Jehovah God and Jesus Christ. You have G-O, the first 2 letters of God, which represent, in my estimation, Jehovah, and you have the first 2 letters of government, G-O. How did that work for us in Katrina, putting all our trust in government? How is that working today when they can't even come up with a medical plan for Americans? How is that working? You know, how is that working when we're $21 trillion in debt? How is that working when people are getting gunned down on American streets and cops are being ambushed? How is the government working? How is it that a Syrian refugee can get free medical care, free health care, free legal service? A man in my church that grew up in America, he was born in Kentucky. He's worked all of his life in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin, Texas, and we can't get him a food stamp. This is a guy who loves America, was born here, a Caucasian. We can't get him literally one food stamp. We can't get him any Social Security. But boy, if you're from El Salvador or from Syria, you can have, I'm saying our country is whacked out. We are nuts. We are beyond comprehension. And the reason is we have been taught through the socialism of our culture in the last 75 to 100 years, put all your trust in government, the first G-O, or the second G-O with a small g, government. I want to tell you something, Brian. and I know you believe in God, you can call him a higher power. Your listeners and viewers can call him a supreme being or the creator. But I don't want to go into eternity wondering, is it Buddha? Is it Allah? Is it Muhammad? Is it Confucius? Is it the originator of Shintoism and Taoism? Is it the Maharishi Yogi? Is it the guy in Tibet, the Dalai Lama? Is it the Pope? I want to go into eternity knowing where I'm headed. And if I die today, and by the way, all the stuff that I called on Bill Cunningham's show, I told his listening audience, which numbers into the tens of millions because it's syndicated, I called right before the election, I called Hillary Clinton a demon-possessed witch. And I've told Jim Myers, Jim, how are you and I still alive with all the stuff we've printed against the government? But you know what? I don't fear death. You know, I fight for my country verbally, politically, spiritually. I pray for our leaders. I prayed for Obama every day, and I was not his biggest fan. And I'm telling you, Brian, that in this unstable time, in these perilous times, that there is a rock, and it's Jesus Christ. Again, is every Catholic wrong? Is every Orthodox? And I'm not saying every Catholic is a true believer. Certainly they're not. We have enough Baptists in hell to have a Bible conference. 80% of the population of the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville are former Baptists. So there's going to be a lot of Baptists in hell, and there's going to be a lot of Catholics in heaven. There's going to be a lot of good people in hell because they put their trust in their works and their good deeds, and there's going to be a lot of bad people in heaven. Boy, that really shakes people up when I say that in front of when I visit churches and preach in other churches. When I say there's going to be a lot of good people in hell and a lot of bad people in heaven, because the bad people in heaven trusted Christ right before they died, and their sins are covered by the blood of Jesus. So, man, that's another reason. You asked me before, should we try? Should we even attempt to save America? Should we even attempt to try to salvage some of the Western culture? I say yes, because through that, we can present Jesus Christ, who represents a better world. And the Bible promises us, Brian, 70. That's 70 years. We're not going to live to be 969 like Methuselah. But if we live to be 70, 80, or if we're very fortunate and blessed to live to be 90 or 100, there's got to be more than just this. There's got to be more than just this existence in this crazy, whacked-out world. And I submit there is. And there's a place where there's no disease, no cancer, no divorce, no heart disease, no terrorism, no violence, and it's called heaven, where Jesus Christ is the sun during the day and the moon at night. We're not going to need any stars. So that's what I believe in a nutshell.
Well, man, like I said, I wanted to get into about an hour and a half on that topic, but we've reached the point where we've run out of minutes here in the evening. We're going to have to do this again. I always like this because we can talk politics, we can talk spirituality, we can talk about fun stuff, we can talk about breaking news, and it's all interconnected. It's all related. You think of if you had a barbecue at your house, what would you be talking about with your family and your friends? What would you be talking about? You'd be talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers. You'd be talking about who are we, what are we doing here, what's the purpose, what happens when we leave, is there another world, is there a heaven, do we get reincarnated? You have these this is normal American life. This is the way it's supposed to be. So, yes, in an ideal world, we would have talked about Easter and Jesus Christ and religion and spirituality and metaphysics in the beginning. However, it is what it is. I did want to throw in there that there's one of our more popular shows. We did the show about a year ago with Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower. Who,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we had a show on here, and Laura Eisenhower, her quote was, "A vote for demonic Hillary is a contract with the dark side." That's what it was.
Hey.
It was Laura Eisenhower, a vote for demonic Hillary.
Laura and I have a lot in common. We both called her a demon-possessed witch on national radio.
It's a contract with the dark side, exactly. No, and this was so after the show. I take notes when I do my show. I'm very I don't know if it's analog or what you would want to call it, but I actually like the. Hold on, here. Let me do my Rush Limbaugh imitation.
So, my formerly nicotine-stained fingers.
Formerly nicotine-stained fingers. Excellence in broadcasting. No, but I like having pieces of paper when I do my show, and I take notes. I take physical notes. So when I did the show with Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower, that quote came up: "A vote for demonic Hillary is a contract with the dark side." And I went, "Oh my God!" This was a year ago, by the way. This was April of 2016 when people were laughing at the concept of Donald Trump as president. Remember how astonishing, how out there, how outrageous that concept was a year ago. And so I listened to the show and I kept looking at what I underlined and I put a star next to it and I circled it and I said, "That's it." So I uploaded the show and then I put next to it, a vote for demonic Hillary is a contract with the dark side. And I sent Laura Eisenhower a text and I said, "Laura," I go, "Hey, just take a look. I uploaded our show and here's what I titled it." I go, "But these are your words out of your mouth. I didn't put them there, and I'm not pretending you said this. These are things you said. If you legitimately believe as strongly as you do about this, I just wanted to give you the right of first refusal. If you would rather have me change the title, I would understand, because this is pretty out there. You're really putting yourself out there, Laura." And she said, "Yeah, let me think about it." And then she gets back to me within a couple of hours, and she said, "Oh yeah, that's it. That's how I want it to be. That's what I mean. That's what I meant. That's why I said it. Let's get it out there." And it's to date one of our top 5 shows that we've ever done because it resonated with so many people. We know something is wrong with that Clinton crime family. We know that something is off. And that's not to just to blindly say, "I love Donald Trump, yeah, because he's not Hillary. He's not Hillary Clinton. It's not Bill Clinton. Oh, they're the worst." It's not even saying that. It's just that we know deep down under our skin, in the pulse of our veins, there's something wrong with that family, and they need to get the Heisman. You need to be kept 2.5 yards away from power at all costs. Whatever it takes. You are not allowed to gain the seat of power again. You can't be trusted. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because your quote was very similar to what Laura Eisenhower had to say. And I just get a kick out of comparing both of them. Is that the first time you heard that, or did you happen to check out that show yet?
No, I haven't checked out that show yet, and this is the first time I've heard that. And boy, I'm an elite company to be in agreement with the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower. That is awesome. The man who warned us about a potential assassination of President Kennedy through the military-industrial complex. And that is also one of the energizer bunnies of both the shadow government and the deep state. But no, on the Bill Cunningham show, I called her a demon-possessed witch because she has been known to go to the grave of Eleanor Roosevelt and channel Eleanor's spirits for guidance. And there are rumors abounding all over the media, both the national media and the cable media, of John Podesta, her campaign manager, and their alleged, I repeat, alleged involvement in devil worship and satanic worship. We would have had Jezebel in the White House, or Rasputin's mistress, who was a Catherine the Great, Nicholas's wife, who got tied into the occult through Rasputin, the defrocked Russian Orthodox priest who turned to Satanism and turned over, upset the apple cart in the old Russia from the czars, and that's when Lenin went in there and took over. So I do believe there's a lot of demonic activity. I did want to say one other thing, Brian. Is Jesus relevant? There are more Christian films and Christian movies being produced than ever before that are hitting the actual theater circuit, not just for churches anymore like they used to be. The old movie, The Thief in the Night and some of Billy Graham's movies. No, these are movies that are selling out at cinemas and theaters all over the United States. I have a friend, Chuck Kitchens, here in Fort Worth, good friend. Chuck works with my wife. He just produced an award-winning movie called My Son, the first ever R-rated Christian film. We have The Passion of Christ a few years ago, which is still watched by millions of people every Easter. We have Kirk Cameron coming out with all these great films. And by the way, because of guys like Kirk Cameron, Efren Zimbalist Jr., Gavin McLeod from Love Boat, and Mary Tyler Moore, these guys are witnessing to people in Hollywood. We have people like John Voight that are becoming conservatives. We have the guy that played Shoeless Joe Jackson in The Field of Dreams, Ray Liotta, who sends his kids to a Baptist private Christian school, becoming a conservative. I talked to Ruth Buzzy here a couple years ago. She is now a born-again Christian. And I said, Ruth, did you know that Christmas in Connecticut has trusted Christ as her Savior, Diane Cannon? She says, no, and I'm going to do a play with her on Broadway. I didn't know she's a believer now. So we have a revival taking place in Hollywood. And that's what we got to do. We got to take back the media. We've got to take back our culture. As Mike Savage says, we are fighting for borders, language, and culture. And if you don't want to do it, listener, for you or your spouse, do it for your kids. Do it for your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren down the road. These movies are making millions of dollars. John Hagee is producing some, and this Sherwood Baptist Church has produced 5 or 6. Though I think the last one made like $110 million, Brian. These are religious movies.
Yeah, those movies used to be blackballed. You used to, it was almost like McCarthyism. If you want to talk about any sort of godliness or spirituality or faith or, but it's weird because if you're into Islam, that's like totally cool. You get like the super free pass to get into any room you want. You get VIP access. If you want to go atheist, you get beyond VIP access. You just get like the platinum pass for the show that you're at. You just flash it. Oh, nope, I'm good. Nope, I'm good. Look, it's got my fingerprint and it's got a hologram. Look, I can press this button and it's me talking over here as a hologram. Like, it's just weird how certain groups of people are selectively targeted by the people who are very used to having control and power with things. It's one of the things that's starting to come out with this this Facebook guy on Easter. It's one of the reasons why I had to ask you, how relevant is, Jesus Christ and Easter and this, that, and the other, because, it's just being hijacked by some clown who wants to shoot a 74-year-old in the head. You look at stuff like this and you can't help but wonder, well, are the bad guys winning? The good guys have to be perfect 100% of the time to stop this stuff from happening. And all it takes is one crazy madman, 1 second to just screw this all up. What do you tell people in your flock, people in your congregation, friends and family, when they witness these horrible things and they can't make sense of it, and said, why would a just and rational and loving God allow this world to let stuff like this happen? What do you tell those people? In all honesty, how do you cover that subject matter?
Excellent question, and I do get asked that question periodically. It's a deep question. Number one, the Bible says that every good and perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, that's Jehovah God. Every good and perfect gift, that means good or perfect, good and or perfect gift or present comes down from God above. Every good and perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, in whom is no variableness nor turning, shadow of turning, which means he never changes. Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so I tell people this: good and perfect things and positive things come either directly or indirectly from God. They come from heaven, or they come from the Word of God, or they come from the church. Evil things, bad things, negative things, most of them come from the devil. The devil, there were several movies that came out in the 70s, and there was mixed reactions and mixed emotions, The Exorcist and The Omen and so forth. But in the late 60s, early 70s, Rosemary's Baby. And I don't recommend those movies for anybody, but I will say this. They did have a tinge of reality, Brian. I believe that ever since the Garden of Eden, the serpent, who was basically a snake-like creature with wings that was possessed by Lucifer, the fallen angel, ever since then, the Bible says the world has been his kingdom. God is not the God, small g, of this world. It's Lucifer. It's Satan. He is in control. And I don't understand all of it because I am not God and I don't have an infinite mind. But I do know this much. For people that follow God, and I've had maybe a small impact or influence in their life to follow Jesus Christ, they never come back to me and say they regret it. But I watch people that follow Satan, and I don't necessarily mean just worshipers of Satan like allegedly Hillary Clinton and John Podesta do, or Anton LaVey, the former high priest of the Church of Satan in San Francisco. I'm talking about people that just never go to church, curse, swear, cuss, beat their wife, cheat on their wife, drunk all the time, into drugs, into organized crime, in the street gangs, like you mentioned before, whatever. Basically, vicariously and indirectly, they don't know it, but they're serving the devil and the world. Those people often say to me on their deathbed, man, thanks for telling me about Christ. Ty Cobb, the most vicious baseball player of all time, got saved, a soul winner, wasn't into Jesus on the streets of Atlanta.
Hold on, wait a second, Bruce. We're losing you. However you're holding your phone, we lost you. You were talking about Ty Cobb.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, gotcha. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Ty Cobb, arguably one of the most vicious ball players of all time. Many people said he was insane because he watched his mother commit suicide when he was a little boy. He always spiked the second baseman and third baseman. Ty Cobb, one of the most vicious, vile ball players of all time. He said when he was introduced to Jesus Christ on the streets of Atlanta, Georgia, in his late 70s, after retiring obviously from baseball, he accepted Christ as his Savior. He became a born-again Christian or a born-again believer. Ty Cobb made this statement, wow, this is great. I just wish, quote, I would have gotten saved in the first inning of life instead of the ninth inning, end quote. Yeah, one of those vile players of all time, good man, a war hero. I mentioned him before, Ted Williams. My pastor, Jack Hiles, won him to Christ a few years before he passed away. And he accepted Christ on a pier near a private school where he was sending his kids to an independent Baptist school. And my pastor, Jack Hiles, witnessed to Ted Williams. Ted Williams extended his hand, and Dr. Hiles prayed the sinner's prayer, and he received Christ into his heart. Billy Sunday was a vicious ball player for the Chicago White Sox, and he got saved at the Pacific Garden Mission in downtown Chicago, became the greatest evangelist of the last century, the late 19th century or the 1800s and the early part of the 20th century, the 1900s. He was the Billy Graham before Billy Graham, Billy Sunday. These men were vile, wicked ball players, numerous marriages, drinking, vulgar language. They all turned to Christ. Now, they weren't perfect. I have a national prayer chain going for Pete Rose now. We're going to get Pete Rose to become a Christian and a believer before he passes away, because he's kind of the Ty Cobb of our generation. I love Pete Rose, love him. When I was a sports reporter, he was one of the kindest men to me. And some of the so-called great All-American guys were very rude off camera. Pete was a hustler and a competitor on the field, but off the camera, he was a gentleman. And so I'm praying that Pete Rose trusts Christ and gets saved. I would encourage those of your listeners and viewers who are Christians to join me, of all denominations and religions, to pray for Pete Rose's soul. I do believe there's a heaven and a hell. I don't believe there's a purgatory. And I believe this, depending on what you do with the Lord Jesus Christ, that alone is going to determine not your good works, not your good deeds, not the Ten Commandments, not keeping the law, not joining a bunch of churches, not being religious or philosophical, but what you do with the person of the risen Savior, Jesus Christ, and that's what Easter is all about, will determine your eternal destiny. And that's why we see people turning in Hollywood. We see people in government turning. Mr. Pence, you mentioned Pence. You know, Trump is giving him a big role, the biggest since Dick Cheney and Walter Mondale, a big role as vice president. I have so much confidence in that man. He's a strong Christian, and yet he's tough as nails. He's balanced, very balanced, and he couldn't have picked anybody better to VP. I wouldn't have picked him, but I'm glad Trump did. And so, you know, I'm encouraged, and I'm thankful that you allowed me not just to talk about politics and sociology and religion and sports, but also talk about my personal relationship with Christ at this holy season.
Yeah, it's a topic that a lot of people, especially when you get busy, especially when things are happening and your day-to-day occurrences are getting, you know, things just get in the way. Life gets in the way. You have plans, you have ideas. Mike Tyson had this quote. He said, everybody had the plan until they get punched in the face. So everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So, a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm going to go to church. Yeah, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I'm going to better myself. Yeah, I'm going to do this or that. And then, like, when life happens, they make excuses and go, I just got hit in the face. What can I say? I don't know. My plan doesn't work so good. So, a lot of people want to become spiritual. A lot of people want to get back to being spiritual. And they're just getting beaten down, or they're tired. They have 1,000 things to do, and they don't get to it. So, it's always good to kind of touch base with you to kind of give us that spiritual angle, because for you, it's not just something you decide to do. It's not just something you're 70% likely to do if everything else is going well, or 1 out of 10. Maybe the big holidays I'll swing by for that one. Like, you eat, drink, and breathe this stuff. This is your world. I mean, you've gone all in on the Christian train. Not to say you couldn't change at some point down the road, but you're all in on this. This is a big deal, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what do they do. While a lot of our listeners, they're skeptical people. They're cautious when it comes to any sort of false flag, whether it's Sandy Hook, whether it's 9/11, whether it's this shooting, that shooting, the other shooting, the bombing, the other bombing, the other bombing. It's always something, and people are just not buying into it. So, I know a lot of our people are very skeptical and don't really want to put a lot of faith into anything else. So, it's interesting to bring your perspective in when you're putting a lot of faith into something else. Because you've been able to call out the Kennedy assassination official story is garbage, and there's been a lot of other things over the years that you've debunked and you've put out there as trash. How do you still find it within yourself to distrust our government but still trust a religion?
Oh, great question. Man, your questions keep getting better and deeper. Okay, I don't trust government at times, but I do trust Americans. I don't trust the shadow government ever, but I do trust most Americans. I trust the American people. I trust our heritage. Tonight, you don't even know this, but tonight in Fort Worth, and it's a long story, but it's a relatively short story. Tonight, in a candlelight vigil, your third great-grandfather, which means your great-great-great-grandfather, Edwin Parker, who fought for the Confederate Army, was honored tonight in the city of Fort Worth. By name, they had me come up and read his name. Many people were in tears. I was in tears. And this was your great-great-great-grandfather on your grandmother's side, your father's mother's side, Frida Engelman's side. And it's the people. It's the northerner, it's the southerner, it's the midwesterner. It's the farmer in Pennsylvania, the rancher in Texas, the Eskimo in Alaska. It's people that work hard. It's the coal miner in Pennsylvania, the Virginias in Kentucky. It's the steel worker like Grandpa Billica. I could literally weep about the Americans that have made this country great. So, do I always have a lot of faith and trust in government? Absolutely not. Do I ever trust the shadow government? Not on your life. I see how they rigged the Kennedy assassination and the coverage of it in conjunction with the media. Do I trust the media? Are you kidding me? The only media I trust is New American Media, Rush Limbaugh, Mike Savage, Glenn Beck, Laura Ingraham, my shows, etc. Okay? I don't trust anything the New York Times or LA Times print or the Washington Post. Zero. Zilch. Nothing. They're like Pravda over in the former Soviet Union. As far as God, I forgot to mention the Nazarenes. I was saved in the old Nazarene church, Calvary Church of the Nazarene in North Wilton, Ohio. And Brian, I was very religious. I read my Bible every day. I taught Sunday school as a very, very young man, as a kid. I was such a good reader, they had me get up and teach about 50 kids at Good Shepherd United Methodist Church in Ohio, Cleveland, and it was a good church, but I was not a Christian. I was not saved. I had no relationship with God whatsoever. I believed in him. I believed in heaven. I believed the Bible. I read the Bible. I even helped teach Sunday school, but I wasn't a believer. And Everett Herron, a country preacher from Fort Wayne, Indiana, was the pastor out there in North Wilton, Ohio, for your listeners' sake, a southern suburb of Cleveland, just beyond Parma and Middleburg Heights. And I accepted Christ at a vacation Bible school in July of 1969. He gave an invitation at the end of that session of, back in those days, Bible school was during the day. It's always at night now with all these. And I went forward and I received Christ into my life. And I remember walking home. Pastor Heron took me home, and I walked from Route 82 back to 1287 Seneca Boulevard in the apartment complex in Broadview Heights, the suburb next to Brecksville. I was floating, man. I was crying. I had never cried tears of joy before. I'd always cried out of fear or getting beat up or, falling on my knees. I'm wrecking my bicycle. I'd never cried because I was happy before. And I was bawling my eyes out because I felt this release. I felt that God had forgiven me, which he had. And that began that relationship. And I would like to think that I'm more of a disciple than just a nominal Christian who attends church on Sunday morning or Christmas Eve. I love God. I love the church. I love fellow Christians. I love the Bible. Bernie Carbo and we talked for an hour today. Former All-Star with the Cincinnati Reds, National League Rookie of the Year in '70, played with the Indians, the Pirates, star of the greatest World Series game ever played, as picked by Bob Costas and Tom Boswell of the Washington Post, the baseball editor, and ESPN. The number one game out of the top 100 games. That's Babe Ruth's called shot. That's Jackie Robinson's first game. That's Willie Mays' catch that derailed our Indians for 60 years. The number one game of all time was Game 6, and my dear, dear, precious brother in the Lord and good, close friend, Bernie Carbo, hit that tie-breaking home run in Game 6 against the Reds, his former teammates. And that game has been chosen as the greatest game of all time, and then he set up Carlton Fisk's walk-off. And then the Reds came back and won it in Game 7. But the point is this, I work with guys like Bernie Carbo who are addicted to drugs, and I've seen the change that Christ has made in their life. I went to a Billy Graham crusade one time in Columbus, Ohio. I saw tens of thousands of people of all religions walking forward to accept Christ as their Savior. I remember your grandmother took a bunch of your aunts and uncles, including Uncle Tom, down to the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium to hear Billy Graham's last crusade there.
Yeah,
they
I was
went
down
forward
there
and trusted Christ.
I was down there for that one. I remember that.
Did you go down there for that?
Yeah,
you know,
getting
Uncle
down on the
Tom
field.
drove all the way back from Arizona to your grandmother's funeral because of that.
Yeah, it was a lot of stuff going on those days.
A lot of stuff.
I mean, for me, I was at the last Cleveland Browns game, and I got the seat in front of me. I pushed on it with all my might, with my my Doc Martens or whatever I was wearing at the time, and I busted the whole row of seats in front of me. I took seats with me, and then for the Billy Graham thing, I was actually down on the field before they tore it apart. Yeah.
Get this. I just read before I called your show. First base of Game 7 of the World Series at Wrigley Field just sold for $101,000. First base in Wrigley Field because of the Indians-Cubs. It was the first Cubs victory since the 1900s. So do you still have that seat from the old Municipal Stadium?
That's a good question. Maybe my ex has it. Maybe it's in her garage, and I need to reach out for the first time in a long time and make sure that I get that. It was quite the accomplishment to get that chair in front of me, because a lot of people.
Yes, I'm proud of you.
A lot of people in the first
quarter. I
quarter.
still have calluses on my posterior from all the Browns and Indian games I went to on those old wooden chairs over the years.
And I got one, and I swear it has about 48 layers of paint on it. It's pretty impressive. It barely swivels. But yeah, I do have to obtain that. Thank you for the reminder. I'll have to go down there, unfortunately, and figure that out.
You're sure she doesn't live in Texas? My favorite country western title of all time is "All My Exes Live in Texas."
All my exes live in Texas. Yeah,
you remember that? You remember that song from the '80s? All my exes live, or '90s? All my exes live in Texas.
I do, but what rhymes with Ohio? Ohio, I'm not gonna even try right now. But
we better not go there.
Yeah, let's not go there. But let's do this. Let's press pause for a second. We'll come back. We'll talk more Christ. But we will talk more Christ and more spirituality, more metaphysics, and more who are we, what are we doing here, what are we supposed to do while we're here, and what happens when we leave here. We'll have these conversations more moving forward. This is Bruce Engelman. He's Pastor Bruce Engelman. He's also my uncle, Bruce Engelman, but he's also a guy that has studied geopolitics and conspiracy theories for 40... Well, how many years, Bruce? How many years can I credit you on?
About 45 years.
Give or take about 45 years. So he's very knowledgeable on this. We want you to check out the previous shows, but we do want to split these up in post-production just in case you have not wanted to check out the entire show, it's okay. So that one was about Jesus. I just want to press pause. Let's come back. We're going to talk about Indians, Cavs, Browns, Buckeyes, just a little bit of sports stuff, whatever's on your mind, because you were a sports broadcaster, you were a news broadcaster, you're a pastor down in Fort Worth, Texas. By the way, if you've never been to Lambert's over in Austin, Texas, you need to go to Lambert's and get their brisket and get their cheddar cheese jalapeno grits. Oh my Lord, it was one of the best meals of my life. I will never forget it. You got to check it out. But anyhow, you need to check out Bruce Engelman, and we'll be right back on the other side. Split this up in post-production. My name is Brian Engelman. This is Agree to Disagree on the TNAM Radio Network. Here we go. We're going to talk some sports, okay?
Your guide to the truth. The new AmericanMedia.com.
All right, everybody, if you're listening live, that took just a matter of seconds. If you're listening after the fact, thank you so much, because we split this up in post-production. Bruce Engelman is the guest. The topic is Cleveland Indians, Cleveland Cavaliers, Cleveland Browns, Ohio State Buckeyes. Bruce, thank you so much for talking with us about geopolitics, about Donald Trump, about Jesus Christ, and about all the other subjects that we got into. But now we're just going to talk about sports for just a moment. Where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about the Indians or the Cavaliers? And I'll leave the Browns or the Buckeyes sitting there as like the wild card.
Let's start with the Indians, because I had the privilege of being at the first two World Series games in Cleveland. Their first World Series appearance, as you well know, Brian, since '97.
Yes.
And we came so close. We came so close to winning the first series since '48, when we derailed Ted Williams and the mighty Red Sox, Johnny Pesky and all those guys, Joe Cronin, in '48, in that one-game playoff that Gene Bearden, the knuckleball pitcher, pitched, and Lou Boudreau hit 2 home runs and went on to win the American League MVP. And then we faced Spahn and Sane and Pray for Rain and beat the mighty Boston Braves. But isn't that ironic? In the playoffs, we played the Boston Red Sox in the World Series. We defeated the Boston Braves. And then when Willie Mays made that spectacular catch in the Polo Grounds off the bat of Vic Wertz, our first baseman, and then the trade of Rocky Colavito, the Yankees had the curse of Bambino. The Red Sox had the curse of Bambino, which the greatest manager in the history of baseball removed, and got that animal off their back, that being Tito Francona. And he almost got the animal. I can't say the M word because, I'll be sued by the NAACP, but that little brown animal from Africa and India that used to, swing from the trees. Tito almost got that animal off the Indians' back and removed the curse of Rocky Colavito. Thank you, Franklin, wherever you're at, heaven or hell, I don't know where you're at, and derailed one of the great. Brian, do you realize, I'm getting off track here a little bit, that he traded within a year and a half Roger Maris, Rocky Colavito, and Norm Cash, and those 3 men were the top 3 home run hitters in the American League, and Maris goes on to hit 61 home runs.
Well, don't forget that the Cleveland Indians of the 2000s traded away Cliff Lee and C.C. Sabathia, back-to-back Cy Young winners, back-to-back years. Just going to throw that out there for you. Just by the way.
Who was the GM, the president that did that?
Wasn't that John Hart? I'm trying to think back.
No, Hart was already in Texas at that point.
So Hart was in you got to help me. I've been out here. I've been dealing with Magic Johnson.
It was the guy after Hart that also let Tony get away. In fact, I talked to him. I actually talked to him on the phone.
Hold on, I can look it up, but it wasn't Chris Antonetti.
No, it was between Antonetti and John Hart.
Oh, of course it was. But anyway, while I look it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having another mental freeze, But the point is, the Indians are a great team. And the fact that Tito Francona took a team with 3 injured starters to Game 7 of the series against the greatest manager in the national years, the greatest since Chuck Tanner and Tommy Lasorda, it's amazing. That Francona, I'm telling you what, he's the only man in the world that knows more about baseball than me.
Really? You now I've been hearing that Tito might not be want to do this for too long, that he might have some health issues and he might want to. Have you been hearing any similar stuff like that?
Yeah, Urban Meyer almost left coaching because of health issues.
Yeah.
Tito's been in and out of the hospital too. That's a rough life. I talked to Harvey Haddix. He was the pitching coach for the Indians in the 70s, and then he became the pitching coach in '79 for the world champion Pirates. So I'd covered both the Pirates and Indians. So Harvey and I became good friends. And Gaylord Perry went AWOL from the Padres at that point. And one night I was in the Pirate locker room. I said, Harvey, did you hear about Gaylord didn't show up for the game? He said, Bruce, let me tell you something. He said, everybody thinks this life is glamorous. You don't see your kids and your wife and your family for 7 months. You're living out of a suitcase. Half the time you don't even know what city or market you're in. And I can see where Gaylord went AWOL for a day. The best of us, we have a hard time hanging in there. So, it's a tough life. And Tito is not a young man anymore. Pressure to get this World Series ring, just the way LeBron did for the Cavs, get this animal off our back, remove the Frank Lane's Curse of Rocky Colavito in the great book by Terry Pluto. Oh, that's a great book, The Curse of Rocky Colavito. It's hilarious and it's accurate. And talked to Terry for about an hour after he wrote that book, and he and I just reminisced. But nonetheless, yes, I hope Tito hangs in there. Here's my dream. My dream is that the Indians win it this year, and if the pitching stays healthy, they will. We have the best bench, the most depth, the best power-hitting lineup, the best defense, and the best starting pitching, and the best bullpen. If we stay healthy, I want to win back-to-back World Series, and then Tito needs to retire.
Well, we're sitting below 500 right now, Bruce. I know you were there in Texas. You were down there in Arlington. Oh, by the way, hold on a second. You're telling me you built a brand new ballpark in Arlington 25 years ago, and you go, yeah, we didn't really build it right. Let's just screw it up and build another one. Like, seriously, you guys got to build another brand new ballpark down there in Arlington. What are you doing in Texas? Before I go further, what are you doing? Really?
Well, everything in Texas is bigger and better. You know that.
I do.
We're known for one thing in Texas, and that's bragging. But you know why? As Dizzy Dean, the great baseball pitcher for the Cardinals, one of the last 30-game winners in the National League, said, if you can do it, it ain't bragging. Texas is the greatest state in the union. We have the best schools, the best universities, the best hospitals, the best highways and roads, the best clinics, the best sports, the best schools, the best politics, the best governor. Oh, this Governor Abbott, I just met him the other day. What a peach of a guy. And the guy that used to pinch hit for Rush Limbaugh is our lieutenant governor. And our Paxton, our attorney general. I mean, we're the best state in the union. We are. We used to be. California is the only state that should be its own country, and Texas is the only state that was its own country, the Republic of Texas. But as to your question, I don't know why we're building a new stadium. That thing is still practically brand new. They say because of the heat. The players can't produce in August and September when it's 110 degrees every day. Well, why didn't they think of that when they built the stadium? I was in one of the last games in the old ballpark, which was actually a Triple-A ballpark with added bleachers when the Rangers moved here from Washington. Bob Short, the president of the Senators, and Ted Williams, the manager, Frank Howard, the star, and then the mayor of Arlington convinced Bowie Kuhn to move him to a little podunk town called Arlington, Texas, equidistant between Dallas and Fort Worth. And so the Washington Senators, the second version of the Senators, they weren't the original that Walter Johnson pitched for, the second version of the Senators moved in 1972 from D.C., our nation's capital, to Arlington, Texas. Now Arlington has 300,000 people too. It's crazy, more than Cleveland and Pittsburgh. but anyway, it was a great move strategically because you're in between two of the fastest growing cities in the world, and Arlington itself has 300,000 people. And then plus you got Plano with 200,000. Anyway, so they say that if they don't build this new stadium, then the Rangers are going to move, which I don't believe. Americans waste a lot of money. I watched Nolan Ryan pitch one of his last games. He came off the disabled list, faced the toughest lineup in baseball at that time, the Tigers, and struck out 5 in 6 innings or something. No, he struck out 5 in 3 or 4 innings. I can't remember. Amazing. He was an old man, and he still mowed down the most vicious lineup at that time, the Tigers, and that was in the old ballpark. And now we've had the new ballpark, and of course I've lived in the Metroplex area twice. It's almost like my second home. I used to go to about 30 games a year, and you're right, I was to all 3 Indians games. The Indians looked so sharp. And then all of a sudden we went into the slump, and the White Sox kicked our tails. But we won tonight. We won 3-1 tonight.
No, not the White Sox, the Cubs. You swapped the Chicago teams there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
It's okay.
but we swept the Rangers, and this shortstop we have, Lindor.
Oh yeah, that boy
Oh
is
my,
good.
he's Ernie Banks. He's got the bat of Ernie Banks, the glove potentially of Omar Vizquel, and the speed of Maury Wills.
Hold on, and the smile of who?
The smile of Ernie Banks.
Kenny Lofton, Omar, like just that ding, they just smile and you get that glint. He goes ding on television. You're just like, oh, this guy. I remember your son and I were at a Indians Angels game. We were at a Anaheim Angels game versus the Cleveland Indians. We knew where they were staying at the hotel, so we went over to that place and we talked with Andre Knott, and we were talking with him. We did a kind of an impromptu interview. Maybe he was a few sheets to the wind, so maybe we didn't publish the interview. And maybe we could have and should have. Maybe I'll send it to him, and we'll link up with him next time this year when they meet again. But we talked about it, and we were kind of going over some of the logistics of this team, and he was telling us about Francisco Lindor, about how the league is trying to push him, and the Cleveland Indians are trying to push him into, go out and do some of these publicity things and go talk to the youth, this, that, and the other. And when he got to Los Angeles, Francisco Lindor, he just said, yeah, I'm not going to be doing that thing. I'm going to go to Compton. Like, I'm just going to Compton. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to talk to these cats. I just want to go out on the streets and I want to meet these people. I just want to see what's going on, because the people that can afford to pay the hundreds or thousands of dollars to get in to see me and get an autograph and a photograph at a thing sponsored by Major League Baseball, they don't need me. He said the people that need me can't afford to come by to one of these events and say hello. So I'm going to go to Compton. I'm going to go do that because that's what the league needs. The league needs people like me to go to places like that right now. And Andre Knott, he told me, and your boy, by the way, Justin, he said, that was one of the most impressive things about Francisco Lindor, was that he was so aware in his early 20s what he means to the community, what he means to baseball in general, what he means to the Cleveland Indians. There's different levels of what you mean. And he just knew instinctively, I'm not going to go do that thing. I'm going to go where people really need me. And that was a sign of maturity. And that's when you go, oh my gosh, we might have the next Derek Jeter on our team. We might have a guy that gets it, that is super intelligent, that's going to be the right kind of player on the right types of teams, and he's going to be one of those machine parts in the middle that can get the job done at the end of the day. And then you add Edwin Encarnacion, and it's a whole different story. But yeah, I mean, I'll never forget when Andre Knott was talking to your boy and myself about that. I knew that we had something special, even though at that point I hadn't studied Francisco Lindor all that much. I checked out the highlights and watched his stats and this, that, or the other. But, a lot of what's about to happen in the NFL draft coming up here in a week or two, it's all about the type of person that you're drafting. It's not just their talent. It's about who they are. Are you drafting a Pittsburgh Steeler kind of guy, somebody that gets it? Are you drafting an Ohio State Buckeye that understands what it means to become excellent in your field? Do you get it, or do you not get it? And I think that's a big difference. I think what the Cleveland Indians went through last year, it's brutal, but Bruce, I'll tell you, it reminds me a lot of when the Cleveland Cavaliers had to go up against the Warriors with an injured Kyrie Irving and an injured Kevin Love. We were down two of our three top starters, and then the Cleveland Indians last year against the Chicago Cubs, we were down Carlos Carrasco, we were down Danny Salazar, we were down our number 2 and our number 3 pitcher. What do you want from us?
And then Trevor Bauer gets hurt with the drone.
With a drone, of course. Thanks, Obama. Sorry, just a joke. But sorry, not to make light of drone strikes, but yeah, it's really a fascinating time to be a Cleveland sports fan. I mean, I left you a million different angles you can follow up on, so go wherever you feel like, my man.
Well, I do believe in curses. The Bible is quite clear that curses are a reality. Sometimes one's own psychology lets their mind get out of control, and they see ghosts where there are no ghosts, and they experience curses where they don't really exist. I do believe there was some kind of curse on Cleveland sports. I don't know if it's because of the city, Frank Lane's trade of Calavito, the American natives putting a curse on the Indians back in the 60s because of Chief Wahoo. But to have all those upsets when we were ahead by 2 touchdowns against Elway, and they came back 3 times with Bernie Kosar on the other side, and the Crusaders would lose to New England Whalers, and the Cavaliers would lose to the Celtics with the great Bill Fitch, and on, Red Wright with Brian Sipe, and on, and the great Sam Rutigliano, on, and in the Game 7 against the Miami Marlins, then the Florida Marlins, and on, and Mike Hargrove pinch hitting Mike Poole, who hadn't hit in 4 years and had a fungo bat. It's just on, and up 3 games to none or 3 games to 1 with Eric Wedge, and the Red Sox come back and beat us. When is this nightmare, this hellish nightmare, going to end? And then Terry Pluto did such a great job of outlining all the unfortunate tragedies, going back to, Carl Mays Bean, one of our players in 1920, went on to win the World Series, Ray Chapman, our shortstop, and good night, the terrible boat accident with our ace relief pitcher and 2 other good pitchers in Florida, and
Bob Ojeda. That was Bob Ojeda, Steve Olin, and Tim Cruz. Oh yeah, that was
good
brutal.
memory. Yeah, and then that same year was it Cliff Young that got killed in a car wreck that same year, and the next Willie Mays got leukemia and died. Bond, his name was Bond, back in the early '60s, and our third baseman in the late '60s got hepatitis. He's from Texas here. The name slips me for just a second, but it will come back to me. Anyway, all the curses of Cleveland sports, whether it be the Cavs, the Crusaders, the Barons, the Indians, the Browns. And I really think that we've got the man. If he stays healthy and his pitchers stay healthy, we have the man to lift all the curses. Well, LeBron opened the door. You went up there for that parade. I want you to talk about that in a second. But let me say this: the only mistake Tito made, and I am nobody to question Tito Francona. He has forgotten more about baseball than I'll ever remember or know. He knows more in his little pinky finger than I know my entire physique and body. But why he didn't start that young pitcher that pitched so well against the mighty Blue Jays when we had 3 or 4 pitchers injured, why didn't he do that?
You gotta give him.
Started a rookie named Bruce Keeson in '71, and he shut down the mighty Orioles.
Yeah, but you gotta look. He got. You know who he is? Terry Francona was a little bit like one of those guys. Maybe it's not Mad Max, but pick your post-apocalyptic movie of choice, if you will. And you have to make it across the Mojave Desert. You got to make it across whatever desert, whatever stretch of land. He was able to jury-rig together whatever parts he could to get him from point A to point B. And that really is what it took. He was able to use the parts that he had and to jury rig and build and manufacture and create different parts that could reinforce and get that vehicle from point A to point B. I don't know. Maybe if we don't go back to Bauer, maybe we win it. Maybe if we don't go to Cliff Lee a third time in a series, maybe we win it. If we don't have to go back to, our relief pitcher, Andrew Miller one more time. Sorry, I couldn't think of his name. Andrew Miller one more time. Maybe we get it. I don't know what it was, but in a way though, Bruce, this was payback for all those Warriors blew a 3-1 lead jokes. The Cavaliers were they were at the forefront of these jokes, and they got to laugh it up and yuck it up, and then the Indians, they were on the opposite side of it. I can't fault the fans from Chicago. I mean, good for them. They've been waiting, 108 years or something like that since they've had a chance to root for a championship. Now, I will say, I don't care about your 108 years because in the meantime, you've had the Blackhawks, you've had the Bears, you've had Michael Jordan, perhaps the second best player ever to play the game of basketball on your team, winning 6 championships. I mean, you guys have nothing over Cleveland that sat there and watched nothing happen since 48. If we're having a pity party Olympics, I know Cleveland gets the gold. There's no way that we're getting a silver or a bronze. I know that your Cubs had a rough stretch, but you had plenty of other stuff to keep you occupied. I mean, for Cleveland, it was a whole lot of nothing. So, I
the Blackhawks of the late 60s and 70s, early 80s with Bobby and Dennis Hall and Stan Mikita and Tony Esposito, their goalie, great hockey, And, like you say, the Bears, I was in seminary. I saw every game in 85 on television, including the Super Bowl tape. I went to church, but saw it taped that night. I saw the great, in my estimation, one of the 3 greatest NFL teams of all time, the 64 Browns. I'm talking about for one season now, not dynasties like the Steelers or the Cowboys or the 49ers, but for one season, the 64 Browns, the 85 Bears, and the undefeated 72 Miami Dolphins. So you're right. I mean, but if I have to lose to one team, it would be the Cubs. I went to seminary there. Cub fans are great. They're ultra loyal. They're vocal. You got Harry Carey. You got Bill Murray. You got the whole scene there. And then good old Wrigley Field, the ivy covered outfield where they're the ones who fashioned throwing the home run ball back into the outfield, not wanting the enemy's ball. And the Cubs, and when I flew up for the game, the games, all the Cub fans in the airports, there was a camaraderie. It wasn't the usual bitterness, like if they had been Cardinal fans or Reds fans. It was like, hey, we're with you, And if I had to lose to one team, don't get me wrong, I wanted to win that thing. We should have won it. We had 3-1. But if I have to lose to one team, it would be the Cubbies. If I have to lose to one manager, it's the great Joe Madden, a fellow Pennsylvania boy.
Yeah, I mean, to watch the Cubs get that monkey off their back, to go ahead and break that curse for them. Yeah, kudos. But you know what? On the flip side, by the way, just to come back here, you reminded me a second ago something you said. There's a lyric from a song called Cocky. The lyricist is Kid Rock. The artist is Kid Rock. The song is Cocky, and they say I'm cocky, and I say what? It ain't bragging, MFer, if you back it up. And I had to pull that up and make sure. They say I'm cocky, and I say what? It ain't bragging, MFer, if you back it up. You said something very similar a second ago, and it just reminded me of it. So you can check out that song. That's Cocky by Kid Rock. But, talking about the Cleveland Indians, maybe they got a little cocky up 3-1. I mean, it's hard not to. You can taste it. You have 3 chances to just win 1. It's almost more statistically unlikely that could happen than it would actually happen. So who knows if the Indians, who knows if they got cocky or not? But hold on, really quick though. I wanted to go through this because I did pull this up. We'll get to cocky in 3-1, and I'll bounce it back to you. But in chronological order, I did do the research while we were talking. Cleveland Indians general managers. I'm going to start at 1903. Tell me when you recognize some of these names, okay, Bruce? I'm going to start from 1903 to 1916. Cleveland Indians general manager.
In honor of Bingo Smith, the former great Cavalier, I'll say Bingo when I recognize the name.
Bingo Smith. No. We're not going to do Cavaliers. We're going to do Cleveland Indians.
No. I'm saying in honor of Bingo Smith, when I recognize the Indians GM or president, I will say Bingo in honor of Bingo Smith. No, it has nothing to do with the Cavs.
So when you don't get it, are we going to say Modell?
Yeah.
What do we say? What do we say? Elway. Okay, what's our safe word? What's our not so safe word? Okay.
Frank Lane.
1903 is Ernest S. Barney Barnard.
Frank Lane.
Bob McElroy, 16 to 17.
Frank Lane.
Ernest S. Barney Barnard came in again for another 10 years, 1917 to 1927.
Bingo. I've heard the name now. Go ahead.
You literally have. You literally heard it about 7 seconds ago. Nicely played.
Yes.
Billy Evans, 27 to 35.
Bingo. I've heard of him, yes.
C.C. Cy Slapnicka, 35-41.
Also, the scout that signed Bob Feller. Yes, very familiar with Cy. Great GM and a great scout.
Excellent. See,
Bingo.
you're
Bingo.
already on top of it. We got some bingos. Roger Peckinpah, 41-46.
Bingo.
All
Bingo.
right. I think you're going to get the rest of these now. Bill Veeck.
Bill Veeck. Yes. When your grandparents, Mel and Frida and Mr. and Mrs. Billica, were Indian fans, Bill Veeck is the man who brought the first black to the American League, Larry Doby, who they're honoring this week in Cleveland, ironically, and brought the first black pitcher in, Satchel Paige, and invented the exploding fireworks scoreboard, which he later took to Comiskey Park. Bill Veeck, great pioneer in baseball. Last World Series champion was under Veeck in '48. Yes. Bingo.
So Bill Veeck liked to win, so he brought in black players because he liked superb athletic prowess. That's what we remember Bill Veeck in.
He also brought in Hispanic players like Mike Garcia, the great pitcher. Bingo.
Nice. Well, that's that's amazing to look at in 1946 when 1940s, 1950s. What, you want to make America great again? Back when America was horrible? Well, it sounds like Bill Veeck was being a pretty awesome human being back in the day. Maybe I'm crazy, but it sounds like he was at the forefront of a whole lot of good things. What about Hank Greenberg, 50-57?
I stayed in Hank Greenberg's fiance's house and read the love letters, the handwritten personal love letters that he wrote to his fiancée. I used to go deer hunting outside of a house in Detroit. He was a tremendous home run hitter, has the third or fourth highest slugging percentage in the history of baseball, maybe the greatest natural hitter after Ted Williams. And he was Jewish, so there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and that's why his fiance's father made him break it off, or made her break it off with Hank, and they both married other people. And I used to go deer hunting. Wayne Walters, my friend, and I would go deer hunting out of the man who actually married the lady that should have been probably Mrs. Greenberg. And, Hank, then he was traded to the Pirates and hit so many home runs in Forbes Field, they named the area where the ball would land Greenberg Gardens at Old Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. And he was a very good general manager as well. Good guy, Jewish fellow, Hank Greenberg. Bingo.
Frank Lane, 57-61.
Not only Frank Lane for Frank Lane, but boo. He was buried here in Dallas and Arlington, and only 3 people showed up for his funeral.
What was his deal? What was he known for?
Trading Rocky Colavito, Roger Maris, Norm Cash, and ruining the second best franchise. You got to understand something. Pete Franklin used to bring this out. Every year the Yankees would win the pennant in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, except 48 and 54. But you know who was always a close second when there was only one division with 8, 9, 10 teams?
Cleveland.
The Cleveland Indians. Cleveland Indians would always finish a close second to the mighty Yankees with DiMaggio and a great pitcher that we traded, Allie Reynolds, and people like that, Phil Rizzuto and Yogi Berra. Okay, the deal is this: Frank Lane self-destructed, imploded, the second best team in the history of the American League up to that point by trading all those great players. And we went from being the number 2 team in the American League, second only to the Yankees, to the basement dwellers for 30 years and a 30-year slump, as Terry Pluto put it.
Gabe Paul, 1961 to 1973. That's a big chunk. That's 12 years. Gabe Paul.
Gabe Paul, I knew Gabe Paul. Gabe knew me. And Frank Lane, Gabe Paul. Gabe Paul started out.
That's your Jack Kennedy joke, right? Oh, I knew Jack Kennedy.
Yes.
No Jack Kennedy.
Gabe Paul started out as he used to change the scoreboard at Old Crosley Field in Cincinnati, and eventually made his way into the front office. Then moved over to Cleveland, and Vern Stouffer bought the team from Bill Veeck, I believe, when Veeck went to Chicago and took over the White Sox. And interesting. Everything rises or falls on leadership. My friend Dr. Lee Robertson used to say, the pastor of that one mega church in Chattanooga. And Vec has the 48 champion Indians, the 54 111 game winner, goes to Chicago, and guess what? The White Sox win the pennant with Nellie Fox and those guys, Nellie Fox, Minnie Minoso in '59. But anyway, getting back to Gabe Paul. Gabe Paul showed streaks of greatness, but he didn't always get along with manager Alvin Dark. His friend Rusty Dark was a very good friend of mine in Chicago. And Dark was a great manager, but he never had much talent to work with. Paul gave him some great arms in '68, Sonny Siebert, Sam McDowell, Louis Tion, who won 21 games, Steve Hargan, who had like 6 shutouts, Dan Williams, the 5th starter, all those guys threw 100 miles an hour. But then Gabe left for New York and traded for all of our stars, and we'll get to that in a second.
Phil.
Gabe Paul was a lot better than Frank Lane, but he was no John Hart. Let's put it that way.
How do you pronounce Phil Segui?
I knew Phil Segui even more than I knew. In fact, I threw a banquet for Nestor Shilak when he retired, and Phil and Gabe came to my banquet to honor retiring umpire Nestor Shilak, another fellow Pennsylvania boy from Oliphant, PA. There's actually a street, Nestor Shilak Avenue in Oliphant, Eastern PA. He's in the Hall of Fame, one of the few umpires in the Hall of Fame. And Phil Segui, and I would interview him a lot during the caravans in the spring. And Phil was, how should I say, slightly above average, but not great. Nice man, very nice man. But the Indians back in the 70s and 80s used to tease him behind his back that he looked like Chief Wahoo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That'll change it a bit. Joe Klein. Yeah. Joe Klein had 2 years, 85 to 87.
Joe Klein actually did a fairly good job. He brought in people like Corey Snyder and Pat Tabler and Brett Butler, and they actually competed. They actually got into contention for the first time since 73 and 74. But yeah, he tried. He just didn't have any money to work with.
What about Henry J. Hank Peters, 87 to 91? That's a nice long 14-year stretch.
Yeah, Hank had been with the Orioles and had done a marvelous job with the Orioles minor league system, a team that won 2 World Series and 4 or 5 pennants up to that point. Put together a great dynasty with Frank and Brooks Robinson and Paul Blair and Don Buford and Andy Etchebarren and Mark Belanger and Dave Johnson and 420 game winners, Dave McNally, Jim Palmer, Mike Cuellar, and Pat Dobson, who would later pitch for the Indians. And he tried to work his magic with the Indians, but again, he didn't have any money to work with. The Indians weren't drawing in those days. They were losing 100 games. They were the laughing stock of baseball. The curse of Frank Lane and the trading of Rocky Colavito still hung over like a cloud, a dark cloud, like the cloud for Will Abner. But he brought in the greatest relief, a curveball pitcher of all time, my friend Bert Blyleven from Pittsburgh, who is a Christian now, and at that time the only player ever from Holland. He brought in Bert Blyleven, the greatest. And by the way, I fought for years to get Bert in the Hall of Fame. He's finally in. It's very political. And he brought in Bert Blyleven, who does street work for the former Robert Schuller with gangs in L.A. He brought in some great pitchers, and they were actually chosen by Sports Illustrated to win the World Series. He made a fantastic trade with the Cubs, bringing superstar Joe Carter and an all-star Mel Hall for Rick Sutcliffe, who won 12-1 for the Cubs in '84, and a good catcher in Ron Hassey. Great for both teams. And very good job. Hank Peters did a very good job.
Who's after Hank Peters in 1991? This really essentially starts the days of the Jim Thome, Manny Ramirez, Kenny Lofton, Sandy Alomar, these types of Indians teams.
I'm going to guess
1991.
was it Bavasi, Peter or Buzzy Bavasi?
No, I think you can think to somebody who went to your team down there in Arlington.
John Hart. John Hart.
There you go. 1991 to 2001, he had a reign of terror of 10 years, 1 decade, and man, did he put together some monstrous teams. Monstrous teams.
Monstrous. The greatest lineup in the history of baseball up until the Indians. No, seriously. The greatest murderer's row, I think even greater than the 27 Yankees and the 60 and 61 Yankees, was the 95 Indians. When your ninth hitter, Paul Sorrento, has 25 home runs,
oh yeah,
what kind of line?
Walk me through that lineup. Walk me through it again.
Okay, Kenny Lofton batted first. One of the greatest leadoff hitters in baseball, had speed and power, almost like Ricky Henderson. Batting second was Omar Vizquel, who every year he played, he became a better and better hitter. He actually acquired some power. He, at the end of his career, he could bunt, he could hit and run, he could run and hit.
And you know what he was, Bruce? You know what he was? He was a cerebral player that would mess with if he got on first base, he would get he would build a condominium inside of your brain if you were the pitcher. He would get inside of your head and mess with you the whole time you're up. He is gonna mess with you. He's gonna fake running. He's gonna fake stealing. He's just gonna mess with you because he's a brilliant baseball mind. It wasn't just can you slap hits and get 3 out of 10 or can you bat 290? Can you bat 310 or something like that? Omar is one of the most savvy baseball minds I've ever seen. He just knows the game so well. You get him on first base with a walk, with a hit, with a whatever the case may be. He is going to be messing up your life for the people coming up behind you. By the way, those people coming up behind you, go ahead and name a few of them off, starting at
Number 3 in the batting third was Manny Ramirez in right field. Number 4, Eddie Murray at first base, DH, Eddie Murray at DH. Jim Thome was usually batted fifth, and he was at third, and then they moved him to first. After in '97, and then after Jim Thome, you had Sandy Alomar Jr., the MVP of the All-Star game. Yeah, one of the greatest catchers in the Indians' history, along with Ray Fosse and Mike Hegan, Jim Hegan. Let's see. Then you had after him, you had. By the way, sometimes Carlos Baerga would either bat second, third in '95. Carlos Baerga often hit third, and then in '97 he was batting either second. He would switch out with Vizquel. Sometimes Vizquel would bat eighth or ninth, and Baerga would bat second. But then it was. But getting back to the
I remember.
Lineup,
I would say I remember Baerga somewhere around 2 or 3. But you're right. They had so many wonderful players. They could flip flop the lineups, and you wouldn't even notice. You just knew it was going to be a long day for the other team's pitcher.
Oh, and then Herbert Perry would come in and make dazzling plays at first base in 7th, 8th, and 9th inning and hit a home run or two. And we had a good bench, not as good as the bench we have now, but we had a very capable bench. We got Tony Pena, who was the all-star catcher with the Pirates and the Red Sox. He'd come in and hit some home runs when Sandy needed a rest. Sometimes Pena would even pinch hit or DH and hit home runs. I mean, it was an unbelievable, powerful lineup.
That was John Hart, and that's what he brought. After his era ended, that was about 9 years of who was after John Hart. 9 years.
Somewhere you missed Buzzy or Peter Bavasi there in the 80s and early 90s. You missed him.
No, I don't think I looking at my list, I got Bill Veeck, Hank Greenberg, Frank Lane, Gabe Paul, Phil Segui, Joe Klein, Hank Peters, John Hart, and the next guy, 2001 to 2010. Mark.
Are these GMs or presidents?
General managers. Mark.
Begins with an L.
Nope. Mark Shapiro.
Mark Shapiro. He's the guy I talked to on the phone when he let Thome get away. Yeah.
Oh,
Mark
yeah.
Shapiro.
I mean, we let Thome get away, but he went at the time, I think, what did he make? $60 million, $80 million, and it was unheard of. at the time. Now it's a deal. Now it's a steal of a deal. But you
you know
had
why
to.
he did that? You know why Jim did that, don't you?
Why Jim Tomey did it?
And I can tell you the inside story
Well,
why
well,
Chris
I had
Lee
the
went to
inside story
Philadelphia.
too. His wife used to come to our high school football games. He wanted to re-sign, but they just didn't want to pay him. They didn't want to pay him what he was worth, so he went and got it where he got it. I mean, he wanted
Well,
Cleveland to
yeah.
give him that offer, and they just refused. They said no, thank you.
But the ulterior motive, though, was you're absolutely correct, 100% correct. But the ulterior motive was he wanted to put all his nieces and nephews through college. He wanted to buy all his relatives a brand new house. Jim Tomey was a very unselfish person. Your cousin Mark Haley was in a little restaurant, a little cafe downtown, and he won the Michigan Amateur Open. Great golfer, but Mark thought he recognized the guy, and he goes, "Excuse me, sir." He left his table, and he says, "Are you Jim Tomey, by any chance?" And Jim said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Well, I'm Mark Haley. I'm originally from Brook Park area, North Olmsted, and I've lived up in Michigan, and I'm a golfer." And he said, "Mark, come and join me. Let's have lunch together." I mean, that was Jim Tomey. He just loved the fans. He was unselfish. He wanted that extra money with the Phillies so he could put all his nieces and nephews and future kids and grandkids through college and buy everybody a new house. You know, wouldn't it be nice to have a Jim Tomey in your family?
Yeah, I would take that. I would be okay with that. You know what?
Yeah.
I hope to be the Jim Tomey of my family, by the way.
Amen. Yeah, well, just remember your poor uncle and Aunt Cassandra.
My poor uncle. Oh, that poor Bruce. He's living it up down there. Yeah, you were at all those Ranger games. You're doing something right. I saw those pictures, man. That was a good time. But anyway, after Mark Shapiro, it goes to Chris Antonetti, 2010. And then, do you know any words about Chris Antonetti from 2010 forward?
I did a little scouting for Chris when I lived in Florida. Chris was a good guy, and he put some good teams together for Eric Wedge, who choked in the playoffs a couple of times. But yeah, I never met Chris, but I talked to him on the phone and did some scouting for him. He probably wouldn't remember me. And he did a fairly good job. I'd give him a B-.
Mike Chernoff was named GM of the Indians, succeeding Chris Antonetti, who in turn succeeded Mark Shapiro as president of baseball operations, Shapiro leaving Cleveland to join the Blue Jays as their CEO. So Mike Chernoff. That's where we leave it today.
Mike Chernoff is currently the GM?
Yep.
Well, I'm assuming he is the fellow that brought in the greatest manager, and I say that over Tommy Lasorda, Ralph Houck, Miller Huggins, Casey Stengel, Gene Mock, Dick Williams, Chuck Tanner, the greatest manager, Danny Murtaugh, the greatest manager of all time is Tito Francona, and I don't say that lightly. And I'm not saying that to gain, brownie points and flatter if Terry happens to be listening to this show. That he has. By the way, let me just say this about Francona before we get back to the GM. Chernoff. He has totally revolutionized the game. The old common theory was, the textbook theory was, you save your closer for the 8th or 9th innings, usually the 9th now, last 30 years, right? The Jose Mesas, the Raleigh Fingers, you save them for your 9th inning. He's bringing his closer, Miller, in the 3rd and 4th inning and completely shut down the Red Sox, swept the highly favored Red Sox with Big Papi leaving the game, and then the Blue Jays, which were favored even more than the Red Sox. I mean, Francona is so ahead of the curve. He is so innovative and so exciting. It's unbelievable. And the players love him. They call him Dad, Uncle Tito, Dad. Party at Napoli's, right? Am I right?
Party at Napoli's. Yeah, I was out here. By the way, I was out here with your boy out in Anaheim watching that. And man, oh man, let me just say, Napoli's got a few friends in Southern California. I'll just leave it out there. No need to go further. But man, oh man, he's got some friends in Southern. I think Mickey Callaway might have a few friends too. But I digress.
Of which gender?
The one that they're interested in, it appears. So,
well, I think Mike is. I saw Mike for 3 games. Mike still looks tired. I love Mike Napoli, and they're making a big deal out of him here in Arlington. You know, he was on the front cover of the program and front cover of the New Year book and everything. And Napoli's back, and so on and so forth. And he's dearly loved here in Texas, as he was in Cleveland. But his bat speed seems to be slowing down. The whole Rangers lineup looked very old to me, very aging. And but Mike really, you know, he helped us get into the series. He couldn't hit diddly in the World Series, but I love Mike Napoli. But anyway, getting back to, if Charnoff brought in Francona, and I'm pretty sure he did, great move. Greatest manager the Indians have had since Tris Speaker in 20 and Boudreaux in 48.
Really? Why do you like Tito so much? Like, obviously, talking about Andrew Miller coming in the 3rd, 4th inning, that's one thing. Is there another reason why Tito is the best manager that the Indians have ever had?
Oh, absolutely. And I do not know the man. I've never met the man personally. But number one, what other manager? Okay, the manager of the Braves in 48, and his name slips me momentarily. I do know it, but I just can't think of it. It's late. He got to the World Series with 2 Hall of Fame pitchers, Johnny Sain and Warren Spahn. But this guy got us to Game 7, and really we should have won it with one starter. Because after Bauer hurts his finger with the so-called drone, and was it Carrasco and Salazar that were also out?
Yeah.
Okay, so he gets us arguably to Game 7 with 1 or 2 starters, and that, of course, is our ace Kluber and then Tomlin. No other manager, even Joe couldn't have done that, the Cubs manager. And then the revolutionizing of turning the bullpen around and bringing your closers and aces in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th instead of the 8th and 9th. And only because of the bullpen that the GM and president have built for him could he do that. He thinks ahead. He's a great motivator. He's a quality leader. He's respected by both the players that play for him out of love and loyalty, as well as the opposition, except Miguel Cabrera. They don't get along. But everybody in baseball, the media respects him. He's a class act. He knows baseball like most men don't know baseball. I'm going to be honest with you. Even Bernie Carbo has hinted over the years, and we're close friends. We do a camp together in Alabama at Hank Aaron Stadium every March. He says, Bruce, very few people know baseball like you. I've had professional players in Florida and top-notch coaches say, Bruce, you know baseball. You know what I always tell them, Brian? Yeah, I know. I just wish I knew my Bible as well as I know the history of baseball. But
you're such a punk. You're fantastic. You're trolling these people in real life. You're like, that's great, baseball guy, but I know other things. You should talk to me about these other things, the things that are important. But yeah, that's cool. I'll talk baseball. I'll just be ready when you're ready.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
whatever,
nice. You're playing the long game.
Yeah, exactly. Play ball, but I wish God would be more pleased with me if I knew the Word of God better. The other B, Bible over baseball. But nonetheless, Terry, I'm going to be a little blunt here and candid, and excuse me for being an old man being a little vain. Terry may be the only man in America that knows baseball better than me. Him and Tim Kirkian the 2 guys with ESPN, they're pretty good. Peter Gammons and Tim Kirkian, is it?
Yeah, Kirk Jin. I've heard it pronounced different
I can never pronounce his name. Those 2 guys
it's like
know
Tim
it as well
Kirk
as
Jin.
me.
Kirk Jin is. I
Kirk
kind of think
Jin.
of like Captain Kirk drinking gin. Kirk Jin.
By the way, you know what? I was going to tell you. You were talking so much about Omar Vizquel. Him and Jim Rice, in my opinion, are the 2 most underrated players.
Omar's
in great.
I love Omar. Omar, he's my favorite. I love him.
Omar Vizquel. But you know what Tim said about Omar one time?
What's up?
He was asked, is he the greatest shortstop? The other guy asked him, the co-anchor at the time, I don't remember, Baseball Tonight. After some amazing, field gem, he said, coming back to the set, Tim, do you think that Omar is the best defensive shortstop in baseball today? He says, nobody's even close. He said, would you say he's the best shortstop
ever
defensively in the history of baseball?
In the history?
No, sir. He said he's the best defensive athlete in the history of sports. period.
The best infielder in all of baseball history ever. I mean, we were so.
No. He said basketball, football, hockey, soccer, golf. He said every sport that has a defense, golf doesn't, obviously. Soccer, rugby. He said he is the greatest defensive player in the history of all sport. That's quite a statement from Tim. He doesn't usually make statements like that. And these St. Louis fans, Wizard of Oz, Ozzie Smith. Ozzie was very good and very acrobatic, but he was no Omar Vizquel.